You are listening to the Lucha Central Podcast Network. And now, Lucha Central Weekly. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast. This is the podcast that lets you know all of the latest happening in the world of Lucha Libre. And we've made it to the end of another year, the end of 2021. And this is our end of year awards episode. Woo!
Yeah!
Pacha.
Yes. This is Miranda Morales being joined by, well, of course, the rest of the trio. Introducing first, he is the dashing one, Mr. Dusty Murphy.
Hey. How's it going, Miranda?
I am doing well. And, of course, we cannot do this show without who?
Who? It's
the one and only Brendan Barr.
That's who.
Hey, it's so cold.
It's that holiday spirit.
The holiday spirit coming over you, freezing your body.
Making me have to drink hot cocoa.
Yes. I have my cup of coffee. I'm not going to lie. I have it in my Ballard cup mug because I am a mark, but whatever. I own it, and we should all too. But we are excited to do our second annual end of year awards episode for the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast. Myself, Dusty, and Brendan have compiled a list of nominees and categories that we have thought is the best of this year. This is actually going to be a two-part episode, where in this episode we provide you with all of the categories and nominees, and in the next episode is where we share all of our winners. So if you want to know who wins, you're going to have to tune in for next week. But this week, we're going to let you know our categories and the individuals and teams, matches. Well, I'm not going to reveal too much right now, but you'll see in a few.
You have a pretty good idea.
Yes.
If you imagine what you're imagining is probably right.
Yes, yeah. Before we get started, don't forget that the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast is part of the Lucha Central Podcast Network on luchacentral.com. This podcast and others from the network are also available on all major podcast streaming platforms, including iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Podbay, Speaker, and more. And of course, the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast is also distributed through our partners at thechairshot.com. So, 2021. We did it. A year that, man, I think we were all looking forward to after 2020. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, nobody was liking 2020. Like, that was just the year everybody wanted to forget.
Yes. And, it was the year of our conception as a podcast, so we will always be grateful for 2020. But we could not be more excited for 2021 as we saw shows truly come back into form, audiences come back, companies grow, possibly some companies fold, and really, a resurgence of wrestling into the mainstream. Before we really get into our nominees, I just want to get kind of your guys' brief thoughts on 2021. So, Dusty, I'll start with you first. What were your thoughts on, the year that was in wrestling in 2021?
I was kind of baffled, I guess, in a way, that 2021 was the year when literally everybody else shined and WWE just miserably failed. They had so many pieces of the puzzle, so many cards and parts in motion that they could have really done great. Everybody said, WWE's got their back to the wall. That's when they do their best product. But that's not the case this year. I mean, they put out some really terrible stuff. And, just not fun, not entertaining, didn't serve to get anybody over. just bad year for the fans, at least, of WWE. And that was very surprising to me, given the kind of expectations everybody had after 2020 for them.
Brendan, what were your thoughts of this year?
Well, I'm in a similar vein with Dusty. When I was looking at stuff we were doing, when I was looking at my notes for shows over the year, I mean, I know that I'm the indie roundup guy because I like indie stuff, but it was the story of the year seems to be the surprising promotions stepping up. Your ROHs, your MLWs, like they came in with bigger, better content than the big two. And I'm sorry to AEW to include you in that because you're still miles ahead of what WWE gave us. But, we had a huge step up from promotions like that. And I'm going to leave somebody, I'm positive I left somebody off of the list, for that on the minor leagues that stepped up, and not even minor leagues, the lower promotions that stepped up. But I thought it's interesting, and our awards are kind of going to reflect a lot of that.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think there was definitely some moments that felt very baffling, and a big change in the world of pro wrestling, really, with a lot of what happened with WWE. But also I felt like there was companies that really stepped up to the plate. I would have to say like an MLW. I think that they really were able to take advantage of the landscape changing, of being able to provide niche programming. I feel like some companies too are still figuring it out, and are going in new directions and still are kind of still in some planning modes. Ones that kind of come to mind is the NWA. I would admit that they do have more of a lucha presence now. I mean, right? They're tag team champions or luchadors, and they've had more of a lucha presence as of late. But still, I think you could tell with the difference and change that they've had with production and format that I don't think it has kind of the same fire that it had. But also, with the all-woman show that they had, I feel like still being very progressive and finding their footing. One thing that too, like an Impact, who had a lot of high hopes coming into 2021 with that partnership with AEW, that fell completely 100% flat on the face.
Oh no, we're gonna stay positive. I'm not gonna talk about that.
Yeah. We're not gonna jump into that. That's partly the first and last. So I think that there was some things, and these are just my, changes in NXT, even now as we head into the end of year with kind of a big question mark looming over Ring of Honor. I think that ends up impacting how, wrestlers are able to find opportunities and matches, but also the independent scene still being thriving,
Yeah.
And being
in a bigger and better way than before.
Exactly.
They really stepped up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just go ahead and make a prediction since you've made you've dropped a couple hints on that. I think next year we're gonna see almost no NXT. Will be interesting to see if we see ROH or not. That is really up in the air. NXT, based on their direction, our show is probably not going to talk about them much less. So, it'll be interesting to see where that void gets filled in too, because they were a big part of our 2020 and our 2021.
Yeah, very true. And I'm sure we'll know as we go through these categories, some people who maybe we talked about a lot last year that we haven't, maybe some surprises as to why they're not on there. We'll see where the conversation takes us. But I know you guys are ready, so let's roll with this year's end of year awards. Our first category is one that is near and dear to our hearts, and that is Rising Star of the Year. This is a category that we specifically created last year to recognize those in the independent scene that are getting the opportunities, the recognition, the matches that have really stood out this year. So we have 5 nominees in this category. Some of these names, it will make sense to you. Some of these, maybe not, but we'll go through them and then discuss, why we chose these names. First nominee, for Rising Star of the Year is Danny Limelight, or Rivera, if you know him from MLW. Yeah. We have also 2 other names that may be familiar in MLW, but also in the world of independent lucha libre, and that's Aramis and Aries. Aramis and Aries as well. And again, it seems like you can't have one without the other. So that's why we had to list them both.
They both got nominated, yeah.
We have, of course, a friend of the show, mainly Dusty's, but someone that we talked about frequently and has been making a bigger splash around the U.S., but of course as well as being a regular on AAA television, Mr. Iguana. And of course, well, she's the prodigy herself, the reigning Ring of Honor Women's Champion, Roxy. So, gentlemen, let's discuss this category. Some pretty notable names, people who we have, seen very consistently out in the world, but names that really have all made their mark in one way or another in 2021.
So, I mean, I'm going to lump 3 of them together as to why I think they were on this list, as in for me. Aries, Aramis, and Mr. Iguana are all huge stars in Mexico whose star has been, Mr. Iguana has been climbing up the ranking in AAA. He's a guaranteed draw at any indie show he goes to. Aries and Aramis have been talked about and brought up in conversations about who's going to be a sleeper or hit star, and all of them have started to make a big impact in America, and mostly the indie scene. All of them have done shows in Chicago and Dallas and California, so they're all in a similar category where they're a big name to the niche fans of Mexico in America. And now they're I don't want to go as far as saying household names, but to American wrestling fans, they're becoming quite notable. That's
absolutely true.
Yeah.
I mean, this was the year that all of them, and like you say, name recognition is huge. And I mean, Mr. Iguana, Aries, I think Mr. Iguana was more recognizable last year maybe than Aries and Aramis, but this year, I think they're all equally recognizable. They've got presence in MLW. They've got presence, not Mr. Iguana, but Aries and Aramis, and they've got presence on the indies. That's really helped them catch up. And if you're an indie fan, wrestling fan, you know those names. Even if you don't know them, even if you can't recall where you've seen them, you know the names now because they're becoming very common. And that's exciting. But somebody else's name, very common this year, Danny Limelight. He was in AEW. He was in MLW. He's been in the indies everywhere. He's in the new LAX. I mean, working with Conan. I mean, you talk about a big year. I mean, I don't want to discount Mr. Iguana, but Danny Limelight had an insane year this year.
Huge year. The other thing that you didn't mention, he's also in the entertainment industry. So he
made a movie. Yeah.
Even more in everybody's faces than anybody else on this list. Like, if you want to talk about building your brand, Danny Limelight had the best year. And does that make him the rising star? I don't know. Miranda, I know you've got a lot of opinions on Danny.
Well, no, what I want to say is very unique about Danny is that he was one of the first people that we, I think, collectively as a fan base thought AEW was going to focus attention on. And then when that, he continued to work with them and shifted focus in MLW. I think there was a lot of people who thought that was good. That was a risk, because AEW had the resources and the television to create stars, which we've seen. But what we also started to see is that people got lost in the shuffle. People got lost in the mix. And maybe it was more of a blessing in disguise that they decided, to part ways, or just that, Danny went in a different direction with MLW, because now I think you get to see a side of him, and he really is, one of those top stories in MLW. I mean, now he's, one half of the MLW World Tag Team Champions. And they're, beating one of the longest reigning tag champions in Los Parks. So it seems like MLW, is putting that focus on Danny and 5150 that maybe he wasn't going to be able to get in AEW. And it was a risk, but it was one that is seeming to pay off.
I definitely think that he gambled on himself, and I think he's probably winning. Like, some fans are going to mention that AEW has more eyes, television in way more cities, but the fact is that he's in high profile matches in a wrestling wrestling company.
Yeah.
So
and the opportunities allowed him to go to Mexico, where he Slice defended the belt. I think that it still affords him more international opportunities than what we would see with other companies. He's still very active on the independent scene as well. And, again, actively pursuing, a career in Hollywood. So I think that he's been able to find all of those elements are coming together in the right way.
I think that is the main, if I were to speculate, that would be the main reason, of this choice, is that with being an indie star that happens to work at MLW sometimes, he's free to also pursue his entertainment stuff. Mm-hmm. Whereas, I can tell you from experience, if you're with AEW, you don't have a life. You are doing so much stuff with AEW.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I do want to jump to Roxy, because she is one, I mean, talk about strapping a rocket to someone. She has really gone to the moon and beyond. I mean, this was all starting in April of this year, when she made her debut in Ring of Honor and became part of the Women's World Championship tournament. Very much an underdog going into this. Mm-hmm. And I mean, gosh, she's 20 years old?
She's 20.
She's not even old enough to drink in most states.
And she is a world champion.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
she's the definition of the rising star. Like you said, she came up, she was the rookie, and then she just shot up. We had to put her on this list. Mm-hmm. Just absolutely. I do want to, because when we talk about Roxy, we also talk a lot about Miranda Alizé, who did not make it on this list. And I want to talk a little bit about why I didn't personally nominate her. I don't know what your guys is. The two of them wound up in the finals, for ROH's Women's Championship. And Roxy got the rocket strapped to her. She got the belt put on her. And we were going to have a feud, which I think would have catapulted them both into wrestling history. We would have been talking about them for years to come. But because of what happened with ROH, I don't even know if we're going to see a rematch of that, like in an ROH ring for the ROH Women's title.
And I think, too, it's just for the time span and really the growth that we've seen between the two, between, this time span. I think it's safer to say that, and not necessarily growth as a wrestler, but just more of, the placement. Yeah. Roxy has really jumped leaps and bounds.
Well, and that's, exactly. I feel like she had a bigger jump. She's also going to be in history as that women's champion on ROH's final battle. So, like, she always will have that recognition as being that person, even if she turns into a 50-year-old that's appearing in WWE product, giving birth to children from mannequins. Like, just Google it, kids. Anyway, that's that was my, there's a lot we can say. I just don't want to be the only one that's saying it. So.
Yeah. No. And I think too, with the teasing of a a title or champion takes all match or winner takes all match between her and AAA Reina de Reina's champion, Deonna Purrazzo. Again, even though that has not happened, just the teasing of that puts her in, just a different echelon, a different level.
Absolutely.
And again, it's very comparable. Both had a very similar parallel journeys, but I think with having Roxy as champion just puts her just a little bit above Miranda Alizé in this category. But she also had a phenomenal year.
Yeah.
I really think that Miranda has she's been in her own, but I think as a character, as that hybrid of Lucha Libre and American style, I would say that Miranda Alizé has that way better than almost anyone out in professional wrestling, period.
Absolutely.
So I feel like that in alignment with our show, puts her on that edge. But I think as you mentioned, Brendan, as far as a rising star and someone who epitomizes, someone who's getting that rocket strapped to their back to the moon and beyond, it is absolutely Roxy.
Yeah, I agree. The championship just gives her the edge.
Yes. And she won that title at 19. So she is actually,
that's it. Her youth too. I mean, Miranda Alizé is like 27. Not to knock her age by any means, but she's had 8 more years of experience. And so for Roxy to be able to do that soon at that age, like we talked about this a lot in AEW, we're seeing the next generation of main event talent right in front of our eyes. And it's incredible to be able to invest in that as a fan.
So I do want to talk about, you mentioned so the difference in age is one thing, but you can, wrestling is all about reps. It's all about the number of matches you've had. The veterans in the sport aren't necessarily. And all 5 of the people we nominated are people that did extensive matches in the last 2 years. They took advantage of every opportunity in 2020 when almost nobody was booking. Roxy and Danny Limelight in particular were working 5 days a week in the second half of 2020. So, Roxy is showing a lot of seasoning experience because she's put in the work, and Danny Limelight is the same way. Aramis Aries, Mr. Iguana are all showing that they have the experience, and part of what I look at this is, is that something that is causing them to rise up faster than other people of similar places.
And that's how they've made their names, is by hitting places. I mean, they've made their reputation by showing up a ton of places and doing top quality work. I mean, like, these are top guys showing up. And it's crazy, some of the like North Carolina, you can go to see Mr. Iguana in North Carolina. Like, that's cool. He's literally hitting everywhere, no spots left in between. And that's how you make your name. I mean, how you build your brand. And, like, it's incredible to see it.
Yeah, and that's I think that's something they all have. So I really wanted to emphasize that they all hustled. I mean, I'm going to constantly refer to, even though I said 2020 is the year to forget, people who we talked about and got noticed in 2020 are the ones that are now, they're filling this list up. You'll see. So.
Right. Well, if you want to know who is our rising star of the year, you're going to have to listen to next week's episode. That is definitely going to be a category that's going to be pretty hotly contested. I feel like a lot of the categories this year are pretty contested, but you'll listen on as we talk more about them. Up next, Brendan, would you mind introducing our nominees for trios of the year?
Absolutely. We have, so first off, we need to reestablish again, trios of the year is a very important Lucha Libre thing. Like, this is, hugely impacting the culture of Lucha Libre. You go back all the way to, like, the Brazos, who we talked about, quite a bit this year for various reasons. And, Negro Navarro and his Missionaries de la Muerte that just that revolutionized trios and made it such a necessary thing that you now see a trios match guaranteed on every card. So this is part of why we're doing trios of the year, and I feel like we have some solid choices this year. Like, a lot of these are real trios. They're trios that are kind of trying to find a way to deepen this tradition. And I'm just going to go ahead and name them off, and then we can have somebody. I'll let Dusty kick off with thoughts right when I'm done here. First up, we have Nueva Generación Dinamite, NGD, who worked both in CMLL and then the Indies and AAA later in the year. They made bigger news when they did that. We have La Empresa, who we've seen all over AAA lately, and they're kind of more of a Freebird style faction where we don't always know what 3 we're going to get, but we do have a number of people, and we can talk about that composition in a little bit. We have Legado del Fantasma from NXT. We've been talking about them forever. That is a trio, it's another true trio that they actually have been able to make into a notable trio in an area where NXT doesn't really have that. They don't have trios titles. They don't traditionally do a lot of trios work. And then Poder del Norte, a perennial trio of the year in every award show. I mean, like they had a multi-year winning streak, which was only broken this year, and they only got more famous when they lost. And then we have the Infernals, which is a new trio this year, sort of. It's a returning version of the original trios. They were introduced by Satanico, who was in the original Inferno, which consists now of Hechicero, Euphoria, and Mephisto. So, this is the only trio on this list that doesn't have a lot of matches this year, but they made just a bit as big of an impact just by existing. So I'm just going to go ahead. Dusty, do you have any thoughts on the trios this year?
Yeah, I think that the two that especially stand out for me are Nuevo Generación Dinamita and La Empresa, and for very similar reasons, although in different ways. Nuevo Generación Dinamita, they jumped from CMLL to AAA, and they did it as a group. Like, that's huge. These 3 guys, obviously there's some familial relation there, but to do it as a trio, I think is huge. La Empresa, on the other hand, these were, if not main event, like very top of the card guys with, Puma King and Diamante Azul, now DMT Azul, and then you have the addition of Sam Adonis, and he really adds a certain je ne sais quoi to the mix. Something about having that American heel in the mix, and he does what he does so well. Like, he is just so good and so believable, and it makes you, I mean, you love to hate these guys. Like, I love Sam Adonis, but like, when you see him on screen, you're like, Sam Adonis, you know what I mean? Like, you're so bad at him.
He's so good.
And he's so believable, and like, that just, but it's also like
he's not out of place though. He has such
he's such a good heel, and they work
such a
together
firm understanding of his role, and even just the Spanish language and Lucha Libre, that it's one of the rare things when you have an American in a faction too, where it's not out of place. He's just as integral and just as embedded as any of the other members, and so I think that's what makes La Empresa that much more unique.
They're definitely the most unique on this list. Poder del Norte and NGD are more traditional sort of trios. The Infernals is a callback to a traditional trio. We haven't seen enough of their identity, but they're probably going to be very traditional because they're still working in CMLL. So yeah, it's super unique, La Empresa.
I was just kind of, the elephant in the room with Legado, because that was my nomination. And that was really because it's more of a testament to what they've survived in 2021. And even though there was, that whole Hit Row Legado feud was something that, as much as it didn't live up or end on the note that we had hoped or thought of, it was one of the longest storylines in NXT.
Mm-hmm. True.
And one of the things that almost survived to the 2.0 era. That kind of did.
Well, the fact that they survived the 2.0 era, honestly, is commendable, because I for sure thought, especially when we heard Hit Row had been released, I thought, oh no, Legado del Fantasma next. That's absolutely
Protect Legado! Protect Legado!
And, I mean, like, I didn't see it being anything else, but they're still there, and that's honestly impressive. It means that they see something in them and have some kind of plans for them that we don't know about, and just their resilience over the year and being able to stay like that is a big deal.
Yeah.
Right, and again, to when I introduced them. They're the faction. They carved out their place.
They did,
camped
yes.
there. They camped there to the point like where they survived. They won the feud with Hit Row by still existing.
They did.
It's true. I mean, it was
still standing.
It was still kind of sad to see how, Santos's reign as cruiserweight champion ended. It kind of like literally as soon he had spent all that time making that championship matter and important and rise up to a level of, people wanting to watch. And as soon as he lost it and the series that happened after that just felt like they easily diminished that title in 2 months after, almost a year of work. So, but I do think that Raul Mendoza and Joaquin Wilde are an excellent tag team. And
Absolutely.
the cusp that they have been able to get to that NXT tag title so close, so many times, it kind of breaks my heart. But at the same time, as a trio, they continue to be strong. And now, again, no other factions. They're the longest reigning faction there too. And there's so much that can happen with them. Even adding Elektra to it.
Yeah.
That in and of itself was, we talked about the storyline choices might still being kind of random for them, but they are still making it work. And through all of that in 2021, I absolutely agree. I think they've earned their nomination by just still standing.
It's true.
It's all, I mean, they, to your point about Law and Pressa, they're unique on this list too for that reason, for carving out their own territory. They're unique, but also their overall style, going in and saying, this is Lucha Legacy. This is, we want to make Lucha important. We want to make, and being a trio, taking that storyline is important. So, I mean, their uniqueness is pretty powerful and can't be overlooked in the this category either.
Yeah, very true. All right, our next category, Dusty, go ahead, introduce us. What do we have up next?
We have the Tag Team of the Year. First up, we have Lucha Bros. If you have been watching pretty much anything in American or Mexican Lucha Libre, you've seen the Lucha Bros this year. They were champions in both AAA and AEW. They didn't carry it on throughout the year in AAA, but they were long-term AAA champions. Very exciting team, obviously. We all love Pentagon and Phoenix. Next up, we had Los Jinetes del Aire. They had a big year. They had, honestly, a match of the year contender against the Lucha Bros in AAA. So, big year for them. We have the LAX team of Slice, Boogie, and Danny Limelight. I mean, we've mentioned them already. Like, huge year for these guys. We have Los Facción, Ingobernable, Dragon Lee, and Kenny King. Honorable mention to Dragon Lee and his brother Drilistico, but they just didn't do enough for me this year. I mean, we didn't see enough out of them. But Dragon Lee, big guy. Yeah. And then we also have Los Parks, MLW. They big, of course some trios work too, but big tag team. Brendan, do you want to start us off talking about, what you think from this selection?
Oh, well, this was one of the hardest categories for me here because there were a lot of good tag teams.
Absolutely. This was a year of tag team wrestling.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, we narrowed it down to 4 and then 5 when we remembered that, somebody else had a big year. We'll go over that, but, how can you not talk about the Lucha Bros this year? They have had huge high profile matches on both AEW and AAA, which I believe is two promotions is unique to almost two major promotions to on this list. I believe that is the unique one on this list. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But then you have all of these. You have MLW represented really well with 5150 and Los Parks on here. And then I chronicled what LFI did, with the tag team stuff all during ROH all year long. And I agree with you, Dusty. Dragon Lee and Kenny King were the better incarnation of LFI in this year.
Yes.
But we're going to see big things out of that Dragon Lee Dralistico tag team in the very near future, I guarantee. Miranda, do you have any thoughts on the tag teams?
I feel like this year was a year where we could really talk about the Lucha Bros in their fullest potential. I feel like 2020 was a year where I specifically remember us discussing the Lucha Bros and why they were not being featured as, you know, a tag team and really going after the AEW tag team titles. And this year it felt like everything came together. It came together in their matches, in their feud. I mean, go back to good old Reliable, but hey, if it works, it works. Their feud between, you know, from them and the Young Bucks. You know, we know it works. We know it's good. You go back to it and damn did it deliver. So I felt like we could finally breathe that sigh of relief with the Lucha Bros in AEW and say, finally, they're working in the right pace, in the right spots, in the right matches for them.
Yeah, they're hit
stride.
So you cued me in on something that I just had popped back into my head. Notably absent here is Proud and Powerful.
Yep.
Who also we were talking about in that respect. So it'll be interesting if we get that Lucha Bros Proud and Powerful match in the next year. We might be talking about both of them in this category.
And I think Proud and Powerful, they got to some really great moments, but I feel like they were still lost in the mix.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like they were still being not held back, but they were just still within that mix of, what was it?
Yeah, they were in a 5-on-5 feud.
Yeah, the Inner Circle. They were more of a faction guys than
the Inner Circle versus the Pinnacle kind of feud, and just those things where I felt like we couldn't really get them as the best in the tag team realm.
No, and but I was more. We were talking. It's this kind of for me the tale of two. And just so juxtaposing where the Lucha Bros are is kind of what I was thinking.
Right. And last year, a big part of what made Proud and Powerful popular for Tag Team of the Year was the street fight that they got put into because Lucha Bros couldn't compete. You know, they got that spot just by chance, and that was kind of their star-making appearance as a tag team, at least in AEW.
Yeah, it's true.
Instead of a faction group. So they're back where they would have been without that. Yeah.
And to your point that they lost, the Lucha Bros really kind of filled into that potential that they missed out on last year because of here they are as the champs and all of that. Sorry, Miranda, please go ahead.
No. I just wanted to address the two MLW teams with Slice Boogie and Danny Limelight and those Parks. I think for Slice and Danny too, what some people may not know, but us West Coasters out here too, is that they've been a team for quite some time. As Danny had mentioned, you know, United Wrestling Network Tag Team Champions. So they've also had a presence on the West Coast. Big upcoming match. I mean, they fought against War Beast at PCW Ultra and heading to see them again soon. And Danny made a point when he talked with us is that they're going for every tag title that they can. And now being MLW Tag Team Champions is, you know, really just one notch in that belt of, you know, collecting as many tag titles as possible. And so I feel like, you know, the presence that they have has already been fairly well established on the West Coast, but they are growing to become more dominant all throughout the U.S. And again, even their appearance in Mexico has been pretty well touted.
That really raised their brand.
Yes. And with Los Parks, they were one of the longest reigning MLW tag team champions. I feel like, you know, their reign was a little bit more comical of the utilization of Twin Magic many a time.
But they also had giant brawls and
I mean, I think that was something different for those titles as they did that reign, and a inadvertent free. I mean, they did kind of have the Freebird rule, as we've also mentioned with some other teams. But I think it was more Hijo de LA Park and LA Park Jr. that really carried that with the presence of LA Park as that figurehead. So, and of course, you always had that difference in changing things up, but it's good. We had to recognize them as, the center of the MLW tag team scene, to the point where they did end up getting, that feud with 5150 over.
Yeah, and they had a year-long title reign, but I just, the other thing is that by being on MLW, that allowed them to light up the indies, because there was, I talked about Los Parks, one iteration or another, being all over the indies in America and Mexico this entire year, and there was, with the, and it was like you said, it was usually the boys that would do the tag team, and then LA Park would be in the main event somewhere, but they would always be branded and on the card and represented. Like, it's hard to talk about a tag team having a better year than them.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The last thing I just want to say, I mean, Los Gerentes de Aire.
Yes,
that's
I wanted
just
to mention them before we got out of here
super,
too.
Gosh, they're just so good individually.
Yes.
And the fact that it's, oh my gosh,
it's
just
such a stacked faction. You have
when
Laredo Kid, Octagon Jr., Il del Vikingo, Mystices Jr. I mean, like, the lineup, and you could get any two of the four.
Exactly. And I think it's almost
so
like
crazy,
superhero-esque.
It is. Yeah, like the Super Friends or the Avengers.
Like Super Friends, like the Avengers, like the Justice League. Individually, they are outstanding. When they are together, it is otherworldly. And, it's almost like saying a tag team just doesn't do it justice. But I think that that's also the beauty of them, is that they do work so well together, when they are a team, but just individually, they all are, they all have their own pillar to stand on. And out of all of these teams, when you think about just individual amazing talent, that's up there. I mean, Lucha Bros, I feel like you could easily do that as well, but this is the Justice League of Lucha Libre.
Well, and so you bring up an interesting thing in that they are like the Lucha Bros, that everybody's inevitably waiting for them to all have their singles run too. So
it's true.
they're just this packed bundle of dynamite for any promotion that has them, where you can just, they're gonna show up as a tag team this weekend and light the tag team division on fire. Laredo Kid's gonna challenge the world for whatever gold they've got. There's always something, and there's always something that can happen, just like the Lucha Bros. So it's really, they're both a top contender for tag team, but they're just omnipresent. They're like, they could have been in any of these categories.
Yep.
Yeah, just an incredible team.
Yes. Well, that is it for our nominees for Tag Team of the Year. And of course, the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast, we are on luchacentral.com, as well as the other shows from the Lucha Central Podcast Network. But wait, there's more. Brendan, can you let our listeners know what else they can find on luchacentral.com?
All right, let's do this for the end of the year. If you're listening to this and you haven't visited luchacentral.com, it's time to do it. luchacentral.com is the online home for Lucha Libre, where you can get the top news in English and in Spanish, find the best curated video content and original content not seen anywhere else, find when Lucha Libre events would be happening in your area, find photo galleries from top photographers covering Lucha Libre around the world. A place to have your voices heard, from weekly polls to annual awards, seen and read by top executives in all of the major Lucha Libre promotions across the globe. And here we go, guys. It's free, so there's no reason not to go there at all. luchacentral.com, your centralized place for all things Lucha Libre.
Speaking of luchacentral.com, I know we still have a few categories to discuss, but you know what's going to be the big game changer next year? for 2022 that may throw all of this into a turmoil is what we see at Expo Lucha.
Yes.
Just the matches we've already had announced. Goodness.
Yes. So that's going to be the wild card factor that I think we definitely are going to have to keep our eyes on. And all of you, don't forget, tickets for Expo Lucha are already available. And make sure you get them now. There is now a holiday special for your tickets where you can get bundles for, I believe, $60. And of course, ticket prices ranging depending on the experience that you want to have at Expo Lucha, but make sure you look at tickets now. Even though we're heading into the new year, June isn't that far away. So Expo Lucha happening in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the 11th and 12th of June, 2022. Matches, exclusive signings, VIP experiences, all of that is going to be happening at Expo Lucha.
So as a person who's done both the GA and the VIP experience, I can tell you still get a good bang for your buck out of the GA experience. There's the arena that we were in before always had good seats. You just had to find one and then kind of sit in it for a little extra long to make sure you had it. But you still have access to tons of wrestlers. You have access to all of the shows. Last year, the last couple of shows, there were 4 shows that you had access to with individual signing time and merchant availability as well. The VIP experience, what it added was more during those downtimes. You had more opportunity for one-on-one contact with the wrestlers, or access to the Lucha Bowling Night, which anybody who's ever conceived of going bowling with a man in a giant Minotaur mask, that's, just say.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say, can
sounds like my kind of party.
Are we doing that? Can we ask the bosses if that's a thing?
Black Taurus has to agree to be at Lucha Bowl again, but I hope he shows up. I hope that's a thing. We'll always give that pitch as part of the VIP experience because that made the night for me. But yeah, so they're both great experiences. So don't feel bad if you're only getting the GA. You're getting a lot, and I guarantee with what we've seen and what I've talked with Kevin and Ruben about what they want to do, you're going to get a phenomenal, mind-blowing experience out of this.
Well, we are heading into the second half of this show, and we have 3 more categories left. Up next is our Luchadora of the Year, and we have 5 nominees. Introducing first from NXT, former NXT Women's Champion Raquel Gonzalez. From Ring of Honor and all over the independent scene, Miranda Morales. AEW and really the world's champion of our hearts, La Mera Mera, Thunder Rosa. From the independent scene of Mexico, and even someone who made her debut in the U.S. this year, Baronessa. And, of course, Ring of Honor Women's World Champion, Roxy. So we've already talked about Roxy as our rising star, and so she is someone that obviously made it into this category, as well as Miranda Alizé. As we talked about, it was a very hard choice to just nominate Roxy for a rising star, but it was somewhat of an easy choice to have both of them in this category. I just want to personally note the year that Raquel Gonzalez has had, because really 2020 set her up for what we saw in 2021.
You're gonna step on me?
Well, look, I mean, I just gotta, technically NXT is my jam, so let's, hold on. I'm just trying to do my job here. But what I'll briefly kind of, the year for her, I mean, starting off with, a fantastic match between her and Rhea Ripley to winning the inaugural Women's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic and becoming the first NXT Women's Tag Team Champions, and of course to what we saw her do in April, finally becoming NXT Women's Champion. I mean, Talk about someone who has thrived and grown in long-term storytelling. Raquel Gonzalez, this is the fruit of what we saw, sowed last year come to fruition this year.
Yeah, that's where I was gonna go, because the regular listeners of the show will know that I've been on the Raquel hype train forever.
You've been day one-ish. You've been day one.
Yeah.
And,
Credit to Brendan. He's been day one.
It's very true.
But I'm so excited this whole year to see all of this play out. She had a fantastic feud. She was the center of attention, not just in the women's division, but I mean, first off, this was still the best women's division in the world, and potentially any division in the world for a good part of this year still. But she, like you said, she had all the memorable matches. When you talk about anything that happened in NXT this year, Raquel was usually figured into it. Just amazing. And I'm glad to see that she grew into that area. Reminder for everybody, this is a second generation luchador. So like a lot of the people on the Rising Star list, she started young. She's a multi-sport athlete. She was a college volleyball player. So she's all over the board on the things she can do. And I think, we're going to see a lot more from her. So of course I'm gonna spoiler alert. I'm probably going to nominate her for Luchador of the Year, like every year for the rest of my life. But
lifelong placement there in that. But again, this year was noted of that, it's one where she absolutely earned this. And this was the beauty again of seeing long-term development. This is when patient wears off. This is when taking your time in developing a star. This is when the magic formula, the secret sauce, comes together to create a star.
Absolutely.
Guys, what are some of your other thoughts on here regarding our nominees? I know I already, and feel free to add what I had already mentioned with Roxy and Miranda, I would say.
For me, Thunder Rosa had a huge year. Her feud with Britt Baker launched her to the next level. We all knew she was capable of it. We've talked about her for a while on the podcast, but all of America got to see it. I don't know if it's still the case, but at the time that it aired, the Lights Out match, the unauthorized match between Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa was the most watched match on AEW TV, period. Like, nobody had seen any match more than that match. And that speaks to not only Rosa's talent and ability, but also her talent and ability in building and maintaining that feud. They were given so little to work with in the beginning, and it was really them, like Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker, that made it what it was.
Clawing and scratching for every inch they could get onto TV or YouTube or even on their social medias.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Rosa made it all believable.
So as awesome as what Thunder Rosa did on AEW, we have to talk about the bigger picture. We have to talk about the fact that she was on multiple promotions. She's
absolutely
handling, and she's handling her own. Like you could not go in most of these markets without seeing either seeing her or somebody calling her out to try and get her there. Like she was the person that everybody was on the tip of everybody's tongue.
Well, let's be honest. She is the originator of the Forbidden Door concept that we saw in 2020. She is the OG. She's the number one.
First. Yeah.
She was the first, and she continued that this year in 2021 by still having that working relationship with the NWA, crossing over to Impact at Bound for Glory to face Deonna Purrazzo, which that too is, a dream match for a lot of people. Still continuing a very healthy presence in the independent scene, as well as her own promotion, Mission Pro, which is, that promotion in it of itself is where we do get to see talent thrive and grow to then eventually see them on products like AEW and all over the independent scene. So she too is still growing not only her own brand, but the next generation of women's wrestling. And still this, 2020 was a phenomenal year for her, and the breaks have not stopped.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
However,
but I don't know
Go
that
ahead.
you could find like we call her Luchadora of the year, but honestly, man or woman, it's hard to find anybody that went from being like a wrestler, a luchador in 2020 to being considered literally the most badass luchador in America.
Yes.
And like man or woman, that's Thunder Rosa. She is the most
Yeah.
badass luchador in America.
In an America that has Pentagon Jr. in their TV sets every week.
Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, she's
sorry,
easily,
Penta
and
El
that
Cielo
match,
Merdo.
Yes.
yes.
Still, either no matter what the name is, Thunder Rosa La Mera Mera
Yeah,
is the most badass.
she's
Yeah.
the
So
one that
Absolutely.
they're gonna. Yeah,
And that
you.
match went harder than any match on TV this year by far. Even maybe some of the pay-per-view. I mean, like that showed that the women were just as tough as the men. I mean, when was the last time you saw the women bleed in a match like that? Much
Oh.
less on TV. You know, for free on TV.
For
Like,
free? No. I
yeah.
saw it on a pay-per-view in Mexico where,
Yeah. Yeah.
a
Miss
woman who
Taya.
is noticeably not on this list this
Well,
year.
and let's throw
Let's
that out.
talk
I mean,
about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
because we had such high hopes for Taya this
Oh,
year when she
boy.
signed with WWE for the NXT brand as Frankie Monet. A show that we're going to talk about in a little bit, and maybe that's a teaser. In May, which she made her debut, she beat Cora Jade, who now is becoming a contender for the NXT Women's Championship. So it's also a very interesting thing to explore how much things change in a year. There was so much potential and excitement to have her in NXT, and we all think that she was a great fit for the WWE product, just not only out of her talent, but just out of her charisma, understanding television, being on a weekly product. And it does seem like that is one of the biggest missed opportunities of this year. However, as we talk about what to expect next year, fairly optimistic that she will make her way back on this list in 2022.
I mean, we will at least be discussing why she's not on the list again, if the very least. So yeah, because the world is hers, and we know she can take it. We know she can do whatever the hell she wants. But that's kind of a thing that I'm looking at everybody on this list. Like, these are all of them are people who have had a window, just a sliver of opportunity, and they took it. I mean, whether it's Raquel who, she had to not get cut for a couple of years and not be on TV and not be, and just finally got that one opportunity to break out and got there, or Miranda and Roxy who, took the advantage of this women's tournament to elevate their brand, and Thunder Rosa who took advantage of anything to elevate her. Like,
Yeah.
that's the story of the luchadoras, is they're going to take any opportunity they've got, and they're going to turn it into something that's magical. And so it's telling that Taya's not on the list. But at the same time, we know that she's capable of doing exactly the same thing as the five we got on here. We haven't talked a lot about Baronessa yet, so I wanted to bring up that I mean, I've had the chance to see her in person now because she started coming into the American scene. We're seeing more of her. I think she's almost more of the rising star, except for the fact that she's been in so many high profile matches and being used so well that I wanted for us to have a little bit more of a conversation about her. I believe Miranda, you even had the opportunity to work with her this year?
Yes. So, I announced for her at, Viva la Lucha Libre in, Cathedral City back in August.
I believe she was also the first and only woman wrestler to graduate from the Mount Tempest Professional Wrestling School that she graduated from. Her maestro was Mr. Tempest. And that's, legendary I mean, he is a tough man. And to come out of that, I mean, she was also trained by Super Astro, trained by Solar. I mean, like,
Yeah.
can you imagine? I mean,
And
to
it
have
shows.
yeah, that she has that Cadets del Espacio style. I mean, like, it just, it harkens back to that 80s thing that they had and what made EMLL so synergistic and so unique at the time. And she does it all. I mean, she's very Ruda. Her gimmick is based on the Baronessa from G.I. Joe. Like Mr. Tempest is a G.I. Joe fan. He likes to watch G.I. Joe. Who knew? And so he gave her this idea and she ran with it. And when she started, like, she had to wrestle a lot of the guys. Obviously, she was the only woman in her school. But in Mexicali, where she started, she wrestled the guys, and you see that in her style too. I mean, she has such an aggressive and I don't want to say macho, but almost. I mean, like, it's her style. She doesn't hold anything back. She's very masculine and aggressive in a way that we don't often see in the luchadoras because they tend not to be more feminine, but the style is just different, and she can do anything, and that more aggressive wrestling style that, like you see with the Super Astro, the Solar thing, it just makes her stand out in a way that makes her unique amongst all these women for the Luchadora of the Year.
Yeah, no, she that's kind of part of what I like about her too. She's carving out a very unique place. So she's not as high profile as the other ones, but she's had a hell of a year, like on very little push because she wasn't coming off of a main event in AAA or CMLL. She's still busting out in the American Indies right now.
Absolutely.
Like,
and she became women's champion for Robles Promotions this year.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, like a big, they tour a lot. And they do. Get a lot of American indie lucha in the Southwest. And so for her it's a big year for her. I mean,
yeah. I had, forgotten who had the belt that I saw her defending, but that was that Robles Promotions belt. Yeah.
She's done a lot this year as well for equalizing, and I kind of mentioned this or hinted at this, but like the difference between men's lucha and women's lucha, she has done more to equalize that. I mean, Thunder Rosa too, but Baronessa, I mean, for Thunder Rosa, it's easier. She's in America. There's more talent. I mean, people take her seriously. She's a name brand. Baronessa fought for that spot. She made that spot. And the fact that she's done so much to close the gap in the styles is really commendable and deserves recognition too, in my opinion.
So, I mean, we're talking about Thunder Rosa of 2021. When you say, but she fought for that spot several years ago. So in a lot of ways, we're looking at what Rosa did.
We're just seeing it firsthand. Again.
We're just seeing it happen. And I think she's taken those lessons and she's moving leaps and bounds faster than Rosa did. I think that's.
Yeah, she's standing on the shoulder of giants to see further. She really is. Yeah. I mean, it's like a great analogy for her. And I mean, that's exactly what she's been able to do. We've talked a lot about other people on the list seizing opportunity, and she seizes opportunity. I mean, to come out of Mexicali, she was had her first big win, I think, was over Rossi Moreno, and now she's, on the indies, she wrestles, I believe, for Crash. At least she did. I know
she did some Crash shows for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, Chaos, she's kind of been everywhere and one of the best Rudas in wrestling ever.
Yeah, that actually is the part that we have not touched on at all. Like, she's a natural Ruda. She just always has a way. She knows how to connect with the audience and make them aware that, they don't need to like her. Like,
right. And that's hard with somebody like Thunder Rosa because she has so much charisma and you want to cheer for her no matter what. Even if she's, kind of in the heel position, the Ruda position, you want to cheer for her. Whereas Baronessa, you feel good about that boo because she works so hard for it.
Right?
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly. She's really good at that. And that's a rare skill these days, to be that good at being heel that even though everybody wants to like you.
Heel. Yeah, they want to be liked. They want to be cheered, and to embrace it the way she has. Yeah, it's just so cool. Thunder Rosa as well. I mean, we've seen the same thing with the getting the crowd to cheer for her. The way that she has, I mean, kind of on the flip side of that coin. I mean, they've had similar careers, but Baronessa just did it much more quickly and within the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And so it's cool to see that juxtaposition against each other.
That,
it's going to make it an interesting choice.
That's the reason that I'm not gonna lie on this one. That was my nominee. I thought that she'd done so much so fast, and it was paying off so well this year that it was. I'm gonna push hard for her to win. She may not win, but it's still worth it for her to be in the conversation. And like, she's
absolutely.
There's some giant names in this category.
There is. It was a big year for women's wrestling. We've talked about it before. At one time, NXT had the most stacked roster in women's wrestling, and they had a lot of luchadoras on there. Well, at least they had, Frankie Taya, they had Raquel. But now, like, different, we may see a big shakeup in the list of luchadoras next year, but I think that Thunder Rosa, Baronessa, those are names we're going to see again.
Yeah, absolutely. Easily.
And that kind of leads us into Luchador of the Year, which is your territory, Brendan.
All right, let's do this. So we have 5 candidates for this year as well. We have, Luchador of the Year is pretty self-explanatory. It is the male version of the Luchador of the Year. These are people that we think had a great year, whether it's winning titles, becoming a household brand, or just being a legend. You're going to see all of that in these nominees.
That's true.
We have first up, we have the most obvious pick for all of us. Hijo del Vikingo. I mean, we were all waiting for him to break out, and he had his moment. We can talk a bit more about that. We also have Aries as a pick here. He's that rare Rising Star and Luchador of the Year nominee because of all of the work he's put in. But yeah, I'm just stuttering over my words. I'm looking at the rest of this list. And then, when I talked about being a legend, we have LA Park. Like, our third nominee, good. LA Park. You can pretty much perennially nominate him for Luchador of the Year, and nobody would disrespect you for putting him in there.
He hustled hard the last 2 years too.
Yeah.
I mean, he made a lot of appearances. Lucha Fighter. I mean, yeah.
We can go a little more into that. Just trying to get all this. No worries. Laredo Kid, and then rounding out the list, we have Roosh.
I mean, what a list. And we've seen, the interesting thing is all of these guys in some kind of main event in some company this year.
Mm-hmm.
And,
I feel like that is our unspoken requirement for this.
But I mean, like, to the talent level, Il Del Vikingo, we got to start out about him. What a year he had. I mean, we called it last year at the beginning of Lucha Fighter, Il Del Vikingo, this is the guy. And this was the year we finally got to see that flower bloom. He did so much. There were some rumors, he took some time off to have a child.
Daddy now.
Yeah, I mean, what a big year for him. He was handpicked by Kenny Omega to have that AAA Mega Campeon championship match. Allegedly, he was handpicked by Kenny to win. How do we know that? That's a rumor. But he did win a huge international 5-way match with a lot of stars from AEW involved. He became Crash Heavyweight Champion this year. He wrestled trios matches with Los Enites del Aire. He did tag team matches with them. He had singles matches. I mean, this was really the year of Vikingo. I think it's only a matter of time until we see him in AEW. I think he's going to be like the first big name we see come through that door and, work as a main event level star in AEW. I mean, there's a lot going on for El Del Vikingo this year, and I don't even know that this is his best year. I think next year, I think within the next 3 months, 2022 will already be his best year. He's already had a title defense against Laredo Kid, that hasn't been aired. It was taped. They say it's phenomenal. You hear about it. How could it not be phenomenal? And you get the added, like, emotional investment of them being teammates in Los Entes Stellare. And, you just want so much for him. He had that emotional moment at the press conference where you found out that he was going to be wrestling Kenny Omega for the Mega Campeon Championship. And you got to invest in that emotional journey with him along the way. And it just makes it feel so much richer and so much more satisfying now that he's the champion, that we're getting to see this journey of him as champion. And a lot of times champion is recognition of, being the best, but sometimes you earn it with your longevity. He didn't earn it with his longevity. He earned it by being the best, by knocking your socks off every time he steps in the ring. There is nothing he does where you're not like, oh my gosh. He raises the bar every time.
I don't know that he's going to be that longevity wrestler.
Yeah. If you burn that bright, sometimes you burn out fast.
Yeah, he strikes me as the kind of guy that's going to hit a few of his check marks, and then he's going to go off and do the next thing that can be overly successful at. Like, he's not going to be content to be the legend on the card that just comes out, takes a paycheck, and does a single tope and goes home, right? We all know that guy. Sometimes they're not even that legendary, but we all know that guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, he may move on to the next thing is kind of but we'll see. This definitely not this year. He came back from the next thing. Like, he already conquered being a dad, I guess.
Yeah.
He was to that point. We can't understate that. He had announced his retirement. Now, I know everybody in Lucha announced their retirement, but he really did pull out of shows and take time off, unlike other people. I'm looking at Conan Big, who retirement again this year and then wrestled like 3 weeks later. So, but he did all of that. And since we talked about, we're gonna juxtapose that with LA Park, who's on this list now. LA Park is the opposite end of the spectrum. He was El Del Vikingo before there was even anybody knew there was going to be an LA Par or a La Parca. He was the young high flyer with an exciting style who then later went to WCW and became obsessed with chairs. That is my point, though. He has existed for decades and he's reinvented himself decade after decade after decade. And this latest iteration we've seen is the one fans probably have seen the most of, but it's also the most complete. He's a bigger than life personality. He's a brawler. He's done it all, but he's not stopping. So that's why we're talking about him still for Luchador of the Year, because he's in the mix. He was wrestling for titles. He was part of 2 or 3 major promotions in the last year. Like, you just can't not talk about him. And anyway, we can all probably talk about LA Park forever, but I think there's more people on this Luchador of the Year list that we could really dig into. Miranda, I'm hearing you giggling over there. So you have anyone you want to pick out?
I was gonna say, I think in what I cover and what I've seen, one with Audie's and that crossover, making that presence more in the United States. Not only in MLW, but even, more mainstream places like GCW. Having that, getting to a different type of audience when you wrestle for GCW versus what you may see in other promotions. Galley, which is really a staple in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. And someone whose name that you just, heard a lot more of this year. I think with Laredo Kid, he was also someone who became that difference maker in Impact, and someone who we know Impact's history with AAA, hasn't been as strong as it has been in the past few years, but Laredo Kid was that kind of torchbearer now, and he's been able to fit in very well in the X division. And again, as we also talk about with previously in Rising Star of the Year with Addis, Enemies, and Mr. Iguana, Laredo Kid, even though he's been in, with U.S. audiences before, having again that platform and having amazing, outstanding matches is something that you just take note of for this year. And I think it's, you were talking about teasing about retirements and retirements. It's hard though to deny, the big impacts of world championship wins, like with Rush and Hijo de Vikingo. Ring of Honor at one point had the best and most luchadors with titles. And I think that was that recognition that Ring of Honor had of Lucha Libre, even though they were more notable for that pure style, strong style, technical aspect of wrestling. Having Rush as your champion and part of a team of champions in Ring of Honor was that recognition of Ring of Honor noting Lucha Libre to be a formidable form of wrestling. But I mean, gosh, it's hard to deny Hijo. Like, we talked about it last year. He's literally my favorite luchador. And the fact that, he's gotten more mainstream coverage without stepping foot in the United States than a lot of these other people who had to be in the United States to wrestle.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He built we call people out for their uniqueness on these lists this show. And that is definitely the unique thing for Vic, is that he's 100% built in Mexico. Like, all of them, all the rest of these people on this list we're talking about partially because of their success in America and branching out and becoming bigger names that way. You mentioned Rush. I do want to go over that. Like, he brought the faction Ingobernable to ROH and to the American Indies, and he became the ROH champion for a very long time. He became a household name. They attempted to have, they have their own family press conference with Rush as like the main event of this press conference. So, like,
yeah,
how
that was
can
cool. It really was. Like, that was cool.
See, and Dusty's reaction is exactly that's the point of why he had to be on here. Like, for some people that would be attention grabbing and like nobody would be interested, but we were watching it going, this is cool. This is yeah. So, I mean, his year ended on a bad note with a knee injury. Like, he's not dead or anything, but he's not nearly as prominent as other members of his family are right now. And I think that might be the thing that's holding him back from being a bigger factor in this conversation. But, he is an easy nomination in my opinion.
Well, here we are. We made it to our final category of this year's end of year awards. And Dusty, go ahead with the honors.
Yeah, this is the Match of the Year award. Like, this is the one y'all came for. This is the one people talk about all the time. You see a great match, you mention, this is Match of the Year contender. And all of these contenders, they have a lot of different things going on, but the thing they all have in common is they obviously were the best matches of the year, but not only that, but they raised the bar in some way. They gave us something that we hadn't seen before in some way, and were not only special, but they're the kind of matches we'll be talking about in another 5 years. Like, all of these matches, I think, will be looked back upon, especially when you mention the wrestlers involved. These will be looked as, big deal matches in their career for one reason or another. First up, we had Lucha Bros versus Los Jinetes del Aire at AAA Heroes Inmortales on October the 9th, 2021. Second, we had Roxy versus Miranda Alizé, Death Before Dishonor, ROH, September the 12th, 2021. We had Balor versus Cross on NXT Weekly Programming, which was an interesting choice. For May the 25th, we have Young Bucks versus Lucha Bros at All Out. That's 2021, obviously, September the 5th. And finally, Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa in the Lights Out match from AEW St. Patrick's Slam Dynamite, regular TV show, September the 17th, 2021. Somebody could jump in. Whoever wants to jump in.
I mean, it stands out. We have 2 weekly shows on here. So that'll tell you.
Special. Yeah.
Like, it used to be that you would get a schmoz ending or something else, and that would be all towards making you buy on the pay-per-view, or, even way further back when it was all live shows. You would know that if you were seeing a live show on a Tuesday, it probably wasn't going to be as significant as the one that was on a Saturday just down the road. So, but not anymore. We're seeing they're throwing this into the mix with and we had 2 contenders on here. I'm sure people are speculating which one of us nominated the ROH match, which one of us nominated the Finn Balor match or the Kevin Cross match. But which one of you guys wants to pick one here? I just wanted to comment on how cool this list looks.
I will start with Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa. What a match that was. It's kind of easy it was about 9 months ago, so it's kind of easy to forget some of the details, but that was easily one of the best matches to ever air on TV. I mean, hands down, you can't argue. And it's hard to say what's the best ever. Taste change, context change, but it was, in my opinion, also the best ever AEW match on TV. They've had pretty good pay-per-view, but go ahead.
I do want to talk about that. It is, in my opinion, one of the best AEW matches. A lot of the time when we're talking about AEW matches, my feedback on it is it was a great match up until the end. This is not something I said about this match. This was good all the way through. The ending felt satisfying. I felt like it was the end, good end to a feud, all of that. So just in that respect, where it felt like it was a full product. It was, you got everything you wanted out of that match.
Well, and they had this badass thing at the end where Britt Baker said, "Your mistake was leaving me alive to be the face of the women's division." And Thunder Rosa said, "I left you alive because I don't want to be the face of the women's division. I'm going to be the face of wrestling." Yeah. The chills I got. So good.
Just pure aggression and pure and when we talk about violent matches for the sake of being violent, I think that that's a pretty fine line. And, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I felt like the way that they spoke to each other, the way that this feud began, and the way that it just grew, that the violence aspect of it was added to it. And it was not so grotesque where you wonder, this is just the violent for being the sake of violent. You could tell why it was included.
It wasn't a flaming table.
It felt
for no
correct.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nudge.
No, I'm calling that right out.
And maybe that's kind of the interesting thing with AEW is that when they hit it on the mark, and I think that's a same thing for WWE. When they hit it on the mark, they can really hit it on the mark. And when sometimes they do things that are too ridiculous, you just wonder what in the world. But this was something too that put not even just both women on the map. I think it really made AEW stand out, and it really solidified the next steps for both Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa. Britt in her title reign, Thunder with, formally, and that's something we didn't necessarily mention from Luchadora of the Year, but this was the year that we finally had Thunder Rosa All Elite. we did get that confirmation, and this was one of the reasons why I think fans just are drawn to her, and both of them. It really solidified both of their careers. I do want to jump over to Finn Balor and Karrion Kross, because this was the rematch.
Yes.
I mean, this is something that, gosh, in hindsight, it's almost sad to talk about, because when Karrion was released, it was more of a shock. And in some ways you knew what the ending of this match was going to be, because there was already, news circulating that he was going to be called up to the main roster, and it made sense at that time to do it. But, I mean, these are two of the most insane wrestlers out there for very different reasons. Not as violent and brawly as, some of the other matches on this list. Much more of a traditional American wrestling match. But I think that the beauty of this is that, Karrion Kross, too, for his size, is also agile, also has a very great submission background. And the story here was, how does Finn address, the strength and hard-hitting style of Karrion Kross, and Karrion, again, more submission based. I think he was more submission based in that Samoa Joe match. Or no, that wasn't him. It was Balor. But anyways, I just different storytelling in this, and really the height of Karrion in his time in the WWE.
That's true. Yeah, this was really his highest watermark.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I made a note of it as soon as I saw it. Like, there was, like, to your point, it was kind of phenomenal storytelling. It was intense so all of these were intense, but like everybody, what makes them intense is different. And you have this one, you had Cross's intensity of, I'm just not going to lose. I don't care what you say. And you had Balor's determination to win. And it was this struggle of two people that were like, neither of them could walk away from this conflict and without leaving all of that mess behind. It had to be in the mat. It had to be solved. And so you saw a little hint of that brawly stuff, but it was mostly just it was hard knocks, physical wrestling, which is what, is something that American fans really like. And it was interesting to see a lucha guy really, really do that well for an American audience. I thought that was going to be his breakout moment.
Yeah. Well, everybody did, I think.
Yeah. It's really the nomination on this list that kind of makes you sad when you think about it, which is odd, but that's the way. I mean, I do really want to talk about Miranda, Alizé, and Roxy, because I do feel like that is somewhat of a dark horse in this, in the sense that this may not be one that fans think of when they think of match of the year, for very different reasons. It's on the opposite end of Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, where it wasn't violent, but the stakes,
pure technical. That's why I wanted
pure technical, and the stakes on this were very different. Where Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa were fighting for pride, for a sense of who was going to be the best, who's going to be, again, one of those AEW pillars. This was much more of a traditional match in every sense of the word. It's a finals of a tournament, a technical based match, and it was for, the Ring of Honor, World Women's Championship. But also, as a note, Brendan, once again, called this out. This was the match that he predicted we were going to see, in the finals. And this was also a testament of how two different lucha lucha styles or lucha trained backgrounds meet ahead. Miranda Alizé, with, her years of experience. And again, I think she is really in her highest form right now, compared to Roxy, which is very much of that Texas style training. I mean, from the Reality of Wrestling, Academy, with, a mix of training from, Booker T to Daga and Gino Medina.
Yeah.
And
so they also both did Mission Pro, so they trained with.
So kind of two different styles and two different paths coming to a head to this match. and, really one of the best women's matches in all of Ring of Honor this year.
Well,
if not the best, yeah.
Yeah, so what I really loved about it was that this was what wrestling could be. It was a pure sport style, basically. It was, just because there was no rule breaking did not mean there wasn't intensity. It was about, being the better person at your craft, and both of them did moves and holds and put on basically a visual clinic of what wrestling styles can look like, switching between lucha, American, and even New Japan Strong style on a dime, and then the other one matching them. So, like, from a technical standpoint, was a masterpiece that is kind of beyond the years of both of these women, and that how can that not be something that stands out and makes you want to say this has to be in the consideration for match of the year?
I mean, let's talk. This one really took the world by storm, and that's the Young Bucks versus the Lucha Bros.
Yes.
We talked about this as this is not their first rodeo. They have faced each other many, many times, but this one in a cage match felt different. And we talked about different matches, different flavors for different people. I think that for the most part, this was so well received by both Lucha and American audiences. I do feel like there's still a small population that felt like this was too much flippy shit. But outside of that, I mean, but still, I don't personally feel like there's too much. You can never have too much flippy shit.
No.
That's me personally. But I do think that this was the best match that they've had together ever.
So I'm going to explain my statement, my grunting about that seems to agree with the too much flippy shit stuff. I don't mind the flippy shit. I wasn't turned off by it. I felt it got in the way of some of the storytelling in this one. I think the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros both like to cram a lot of stuff into their matches. And I think, they could have done with about half as much and turned it into cause we know they're going to wrestle again. Turned it into two different matches where we saw some of those spots. I think and some of that storytelling too. I think they could have done, it didn't detract from me enjoying the match, but I think I would have enjoyed the match just as much and then enjoyed the next one just as much. If that makes sense.
No, very true.
No, it's true. We'd seen their matchup at Double or Nothing 2019. That was a big deal. It opened a lot of people's eyes to the Lucha Bros. We all of us on the show, we knew about the Lucha Bros before AEW. We all watched Lucha Underground, but a lot of American fans didn't. They didn't get El Rey. They didn't watch Lucha Underground, for whatever reason. So that kind of opened a lot of more casual eyes to the Lucha Bros. But even before that, I believe it was 5 years to the day that they had this match, that they had wrestled each other for the first time in PWG. And we're seeing a lot of that PWG style coming back. Excalibur's obviously involved in AEW. There's some rumors about the PWG tag team belts coming in to AEW right now. Maybe not rumors, it may be news by the time you hear this, but as of right now, it's rumors. And there's just so much going on with the history of these guys and the history that they brought to it, the gravitas that they brought to it, and lesser hands. The flippy thing. I love flippy wrestling, but I can see where in lesser hands it would have felt like too much and it would have just been a show. But these guys were able to make it a match, even if it felt a little rehearsed. I feel that's more the fault of the Young Bucks. In my opinion, every Young Bucks match feels kind of choreographed and rehearsed.
Yeah.
I mean, they just have that style. It's like a rock and roll touring production, not wrestling. And that's not a knock on them. I enjoy that style a lot, but we have seen the Lucha Bros do many other things and not always have a spot fest. And so I felt like that wasn't necessarily on them in this match, but what they did with the spots that they had were just incredible. You never got to take a breath. It was 22 minutes and it was just insane from start to finish.
Yeah.
And it constantly had you on the edge of your seat. It constantly had you excited. Instantly. I mean, before the match was even over, there was chatter online, match of the year.
Yeah.
And it really opened a lot of people's eyes to what tag team wrestling could bring you, or what it could be. Because even though it was a spot fest, this was like an indie match. This was a PWG match on pay-per-view. And it was kind of unique in that style. Brendan and I talked about this earlier. The kind of indie style of 10 years ago, all of a sudden was like the match of the year contender, the biggest thing going in wrestling, and 10 years later, in the present. And so we've known about this for a while, but this was the match that opened a lot of people's eyes to that style that were never exposed to the indie scene, never got to see the indie scene at the time for whatever reason, just weren't aware of it. It showed how right those fans were over all those years, and it felt like a victory in a lot of ways for fans, I feel like. At least it did for me. And when the Lucha Bros won those belts, the Young Bucks had been champions for a long time by that point. And so it was nice. It was refreshing. It just felt emotionally rewarding at the end of the match.
Yeah. That is the one thing that AEW has surprised me with, is that they have very good long-term storytelling on this kind of thing. The Kenny Omega feud that was not at all Lucha, so we haven't talked about it on the show, was long-term.
This was so long-term. Good, yeah.
Yeah, they did a good job with that. So we're talking about the Lucha Bros, and we're talking about indie style matches. I'm going to transition over to the Lucha Bros other match that's on here, and how I think this is the better indie style match that you could have been watching.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the note, as far as maybe those same nuances, because they were matched. Not to say, I mean, blame the Young Bucks all you want, but just the fact that they do have a good, solid understanding of Lucha Libre wrestling, but this, as their comprehension is, B+ level. I don't mean that with any.
B+ is good.
B+ is good. Los Gentes de Aire, again, I mean, as we talked about them earlier, are a super team of individuals.
And they're innovators.
And they're innovators as well. So
they're
feel
not
like
just hitting the greatest hits like the Bucks are. They're bringing something new to the table.
Well, I do think, and maybe that's also a difference in preference, whereas you did have a really good long-term story with the Young Bucks and Lucha Bros, where you were really, really cheering on the Lucha Bros to beat the Young Bucks for the, AEW tag team titles.
Yes.
The Lucha Bros and Los Gentes de Aire were just more of a good match. And that is maybe not a fault, but a difference with especially what we've had in AAA, at least this year, because more inconsistent availability of shows, that the storytelling is not done long term in the sense of actually building up stories. It's the storytelling they do in the ring, and it's in the moment. But again, because everyone in this match is an incredibly talented luchador, you could exactly have that innovation in the ring that you don't have outside of the ring with storytelling, with storyline. And I think that too could be where your big difference is. You were much more emotionally invested in the Young Bucks versus the Lucha Bros, whereas you were just more visually captivated by Lucha Bros versus Gentes de Aire.
And it had Torantes.
Yeah, you're more willing to forgive the little foibles in the emotionally invested one, but because the other one was mechanically superior, you don't even notice the little foibles because they're just going from beat to beat to beat. So I think they're both worthy nominees. I'm not gonna downplay the Young Bucks and say they dragged anything down, but I definitely think that this Gentes del Aire match was just so amazing, and the only problem is that not enough people watched it, and that's the problem here, that we're
Well, and it wasn't on like Triple Mania. It was on
No.
Heroes and Mortales,
Yes.
which made a difference too, because generally you expect this type of match from like the big show, and the fact that they just pulled it out at a regular show for AAA was incredible.
Well, I mean, so Heroes and Mortales is much akin to Winter is Coming for those that follow the AEW reference. It's not just...
That's a great comparison. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
just another show, but it's not one of the big pay-per-view events, one of the big yearly things. And yeah, just an incredible match.
Yes. Well, there you have it, our 6 categories and all the nominees for our end of year awards. But you know what? There is one more, and this year we have added a new category to our lineup. And Brendan, I'm going to actually have Brendan discuss this. And this one will be different because, well, we're actually not going to share the nominees. We're just going to be sharing with you the premise of this, and then we'll join next week when we do our results. You'll get to know a little bit more background on this. But yes, Brendan, please introduce our newest category for the 2021 end of year awards.
Well, listeners, particularly the few listeners that tuned into our live stream coverage last year of a AAA event, are aware that we think that cookie sheets in wrestling are some of the most fun and ridiculous, to make the argument, why the heck is there a cookie sheet underneath the ring? Like,
exactly.
You do not need it to assemble a ring. Spoiler alert. No cookie sheets are needed to actually put a ring together.
The timekeeper doesn't need it. The wrestlers only sort of need it. I mean, like, but it's ridiculous and it's fun. And so it's kind of the embodiment of this award. So unlike the others, we're not going to have a category and debate it on the air, but we have the Cookie Sheet Award, where we're going to give the most ridiculous but fun moment of the year the recognition it deserves, and maybe even a cookie sheet in the future. Who knows? But yeah, so there it is, the Cookie Sheet Award, the most ridiculous but fun moment of the year.
And as we mentioned, well, we've given you the award categories, we've given you the nominees, and next week we are going to give you all of the winners. So thank you all so much for listening to this week's episode of the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast. Again, don't forget to check out luchacentral.com, your place, your centralized place for all things Lucha Libre. Don't forget to follow Lucha Central on social media at Lucha Central on Facebook and Instagram, and at luchacentral.com on Twitter. Of course, follow us on social media. Dusty, let us know where our listeners can find you.
I am on Instagram at Dusty Murphy, and I am on Facebook at facebook.com/Dusty Murphy.
And Brendan, where can our listeners find you?
I am 321 T-shirt guy. That's the numbers 321, and then T-shirt guy is all spelled out. I am on Facebook, I am on Instagram, and I'm all over the Twitters.
And me, Miranda Morales. You can find me at the #Miranda, hashtag spelled out on Instagram and Facebook, no Twitter. Of course, if you are listening to this show on your favorite podcast streaming platform like Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Podbay, Speaker, and much, much more, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Subscribe and get a notification every time a new episode of the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast drops. Leave us a 5-star rating and give us a review. Let us know your thoughts, especially this week. If you agree with our nominees, if you don't, if there's anyone we missed, if there's anyone
Please tell us.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'd love to get that feedback. We'd love to know your guys' thoughts on, well, where we're at with our awards.
We always try to take into account what everybody's thinking on this, which sometimes gives us a little bit of brain freeze. So, tell us what you're thinking, and then we don't have to think. Wait.
Yes. And so again, next week, our results the winners of each of these categories will be announced, so please stay tuned. For Brendan Barr and Dusty Murphy, I'm Miranda Morales. Thank you all so much, and we will be back with you next week.
Why should you visit thechairshot.com? Thechairshot.com is your home for hard-hitting reviews, news, opinion, and analysis with attitude. Why? Because you're smarter than the average fan. Thechairshot.com. Always use your head.
Hey everyone, it's Denise Salcedo here in Lucha Central with a reminder of where and when to catch all of the great network content this week. Get the full lineup and listen to all of our shows in the podcast network section of luchacentral.com. On Tuesdays, Mass, Mats, and Mayhem takes you inside the world of Lucha Underground as they take you weekly through the series with the benefit of hindsight and the benefit of special guests from the groundbreaking series. Check out the premiere video stream every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern on the Lucha Central YouTube channel and at luchacentral.com. Then listen to it on your favorite podcast platform every Wednesday. Tuesday nights live, it's Wrestle Boss, where Fabi Chulo talks MMA and pro wrestling with special guests and listener call-ins. Visit WrestleBossLive.com Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific to listen live or call in with questions or download the show on podcast platforms on Wednesdays. Wednesday nights live on Facebook, it's Spanish show La Mesa de los Márgaros, giving you both the news and the chisme from around the lucha world. Special guests and a whole lot of fun make it one of the most talked about shows in Mexico. Thursdays, it's Straight Out of the Bodega with Papo Esco and PWR promoter Gabriel Ramirez as they have guests from throughout the wrestling world pull up to give an inside look into their careers. From indie standouts to television superstars, each week brings a new name and perspective. On Friday, it's your double dose of Lucha Central Weekly podcast, one in English y el otro en español. Lucha Central Weekly is where you'll find all the top stories of the week, both inside and out of the ring from Mexico and anywhere luchadores are in action across the globe. Be sure to subscribe and follow all your favorite Lucha Central Network series on your favorite podcast platforms, either by their own series name or subscribe to the Lucha Central Podcast Network show pages to get all of the shows in one easy feed. And please consider giving a rating to help more fans find the shows that you love. For now, this is Denise Salcedo signing off from Lucha Central. Have a great week.
Lucha-Masks.com by Pro Wrestling Revolution, bringing you, in partnership with Masked Republic, the Lucha Brothers, as well as Japanese legend Ultimo Dragon. Go to lucha-masks.com and fight Lucha Strong with masks from your favorite Lucha legends and Pro Wrestling Revolution luchadores. Stay safe in style and represent your favorite luchador. Get yours now at lucha-masks.com, powered by Pro Wrestling Revolution.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast. This is the podcast that lets you know all of the latest and greatest happening in the world of Lucha Libre. Yes, the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast is back for the second part of our end of year awards. This is Miranda Morales, and of course, you know what time it is. I'm being joined by the rest of the trio. Introducing first, it is the dashing one, Mr. Dusty Murphy. Dusty, how are you?
I am doing fantastic. How are you doing, Miranda?
I'm doing great. Very excited to go over the results of our end of year awards, but we cannot do that without the third member of our team, and that's who?
Who?
It's the one and only Brendan Barr.
That's it.
Hey.
Yes.
I'm looking ahead. This is really exciting. We've got this came out really cool, you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, it did.
Man. Before we get to it, of course, the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast is part of the Lucha Central Podcast Network on luchacentral.com. We are also streamed through your favorite podcast streaming platform, including iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Podbay, Speaker, and more. And of course, a shout out to our streaming partners over at thechairshot.com. And if you were with us last week, well, we went over our nominees and categories for our end of year awards, our second annual for 2021, and in there we explained really all of the categories that we had, the nominees, why we nominated them, any notable missing people, our critiques, feedback, and more. So if you want to catch up, please make sure to check out last week's episode that is available on luchacentral.com, thechairshot.com, as well as your favorite podcast streaming platform. This week, well, it's the results. It's what you want to know. This is what you came here for. And that is to know who are the winners of our different categories. Before we get into it, though, a little bit about our structure. One, and we did talk about this last time, but just as a premise and a reminder, this is just our opinions. You know, this is us as a trio making our thoughts on what was the best in these categories in the world of Lucha Libre. If you don't agree with it, let us know on social media. I'm going to change this up a bit. We usually say this at the end of the show, but I'm going to jump to it at the beginning because, you know, you may not agree with what our nominees are as well as the winners. So please reach out to us on social media. Dusty, where can our listeners find you on social media?
I am on Facebook at facebook.com/Dusty Murphy, and I am on Instagram at Dusty Murphy.
And Brendan, where can our listeners find you?
I am 321 T-shirt guy. That's the numbers 321. T-shirt guy is all spelled out. I am on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and I'm all over the Twitters.
And me, Miranda Morales. You can find me at the hashtag Miranda, hashtag spelled out, on Instagram and Facebook. So, as we are going through these categories, again, we will go over the nominees and then we will provide the winners of these categories. If you agree, disagree, think we missed anyone, please reach out to us on social media. We'd love to hear your thoughts. With the voting, and as we start into our first category, the structure as far as how we're going to announce these is that we do have a third place, second place, and first place based off of how we individually voted. Some categories do have a honorable mention. Not all, but some. And so that's just the way that the cookie crumbled here. But this is, again, our, you know, individual thoughts were put into this as well as the collective. So this will be very interesting as we discuss, you know, who won and who were in our top three as well as any honorable mentions. And again, follow along. Make sure you reach out to us on social media about your thoughts on our winners for our end of year awards. So, up first, we have our Rising Star of the Year. This is a category dedicated to someone in 2021 who we feel is a rising star, someone that we hope to see more of in the next year, someone who we believe had such a phenomenal year of talent that it's noted, it makes him a noteworthy individual to have as, you know, someone to keep your eyes out in the world of Lucha Libre. Our nominees for this category were Danny Limelight, Aramis, Eddie's, Mr. Iguana, and Roxy. So, if I'm reading this right, looking at these category color code system, our third place runner-up or third place person, luchador, in this category is Mr. Iguana, who, again, this is our first two-time person in this category, and someone we've noted as having a phenomenal year within the independent scene, making a big splash here in the U.S. Our runner-up, second place winner in this category is Ring of Honor World Women's Champion, Roxy. And your number one, the rising star of 2021, is Danny Limelight. So, guys, I want to get your thoughts on this. I'm going to start off with Dusty. How did you think, you know, things fell through in this category? Mr. Iguana, number 3, Roxy, number 2, and Danny Limelight, number 1.
honestly, this was the way I kind of expected it to shake out. Danny Limelight just had such a phenomenal year that
Yes.
nobody else can touch it. I mean, his year was beyond. At Roxy, I mean, she really did have the second best year out of everybody, compared to, I mean, next to Danny Limelight, second best. And then I think Mr. Iguana, truly, number 3, he did not have the TV exposure and the, more major exposure that they had that would have vaulted him into a higher position. But for what he had, he made the best, he made the best of everything, made the most recognition out of what he had. And so on an indie level, he did better than anybody else. I think that's kind of the perfect lineup for it. What did you think, Brendan?
I mean, you could quibble over Danny Limelight and Roxy, but we all kind of knew that it was going to be the 3 we got. As much as Aramis and Aries are fantastic nominees, and they just did not have the momentum compared to the other 3. So
yeah. And I think with the big difference with Roxy and Danny Limelight, championships, where I think one of the deciding factors is both became champions in their respective promotions. I do think maybe Danny was just more of a broader reach and spectrum with his work in AEW, the transition to MLW, being really all over the place. I think that visibility helped a little bit more, where Roxy, her big, she was really all over the independents, but her growth was really just within Ring of Honor in a very notable area of the women's division, which is something that, Ring of Honor relaunched and rebranded this year. So I think what made them outstanding and what I think helped them in that category was becoming champions this year.
Definitely. I mean, we talked about that with the nomination. Like, Roxy had more tangible momentum as a result of getting that championship. I mean, she's going to be doing a title versus title match in theory with Deonna Purrazzo. So, that's momentum that is visible and notable. And it's important to note that a lot of the time championships being put on someone is a sign of the company believing in that person. Yeah. So sorry, if that's pulling back the curtain too much for some listeners, I'm sorry, but that's
no, but I do think that's just an honest statement about any time a championship is won in any area. It is the belief that a company believes in someone to even put them in a position to compete for a championship. Yes. So
absolutely.
Very, very true. So congratulations to Danny Limelight for winning our Rising Star of the Year. He may have been on the independent scene for some time, not that long. If you actually listen to our interview with Danny Limelight, that is available now on luchacentral.com and all major podcast streaming platforms, you could easily look us up on Spotify at Lucha Central Podcast Network and find that. He talks about his experience and rise coming into professional wrestling, and really being able to go full time as of this year. So I think that also was a difference maker for him, is being able to transition full time into wrestling. But great categories. I do think we're going to be talking more about Atomies and Eddies in 2022. Absolutely. As we've heard about Lucha Underground, or not Lucha Azteca Underground, now having their own standalone show with MLW, and them being part of already some initial storyline with Cesar Duran, and them constantly having consistently good matches in MLW. I feel like we'll talk about them again in 2022. But again, the category lineup, or the winners for our Rising Star of the Year: third place, Mr. Iguana; second place, Roxy; and first place, Danny Limelight. Brendan, go ahead and take it away with our next category.
Oh, well, as we talked about, the next one is Trio of the Year, and we had 5 solid nominees. We had NGD, Nueva Generación Dinamita, La Empresa, Legado del Fantasma, Poder del Norte, and The Infernals. This one did have an honorable mention. Poder del Norte did get the honorable mention on here. Then our third place winner was Legado del Fantasma. And so here's the story. Everybody that heard our arguing about it kind of could figure that it was going to come down to NGD or La Empresa. So, I'm just going to set the stage here. And so our first place winner is La Empresa, leaving NGD in second place. I don't know. How do you guys feel how this one shook up?
I agree with what you said. I think between NGD and La Empresa, that one, those were our top two trios that we talked about. Very similar, I think, with their presence and just how kind of unconventional they are as a trio, but how well it works. And I think the crossover appeal was what made them stand out the most compared to the other trios. I am a little surprised that Legado got as many votes from what we were talking about, that, really they were nominated by purely surviving, NXT in 2021. But I am glad that they got this recognition, because they are truly one of the only trios in all of WWE. And to have that and have that presence in such a big market, is, it's a noteworthy thing. And I'm glad that we recognize that.
For me, the thing that made La Empresa number one in this voting and in the year was that they are three guys, like Nuevo Generación Dinamita. That's a trio. They are a team. But something about La Empresa being three very distinct, very different people, very distinct, very different personalities coming together and working together, three guys at the top of their game, and very different ways, different styles. Something about that cohesion that comes together between the three of them when that's all their styles coalesce into one thing made them just beyond any other trio to me. If Legado del Fantasma had been new this year, I think they'd have done better, but I think part of what made La Empresa so exciting and so important was that they are new, and it's just this was one of our closest votes also between La Empresa and Nuevo Generación.
Very close, very close.
But I just feel like being a new trio gave them the edge in this matchup this year.
Well, you touched on the critical difference for me. NGD is a true, authentic trio, whereas La Empresa is a collection. So I'm a little surprised that the collection actually came out on top, but I'm not shocked or appalled or anything. They did, to your point, and what we talked about last week, is they did draw the attention. They drew all the eyes. They did everything they're supposed to do. Sam Adonis is such a consummate professional. He makes them hard to not talk about. So, I mean, it does not shock me at all. I just, for me, the difference really in the way that my mindset was that who was the trio and who was the, who's the sensation. So.
True. Well, there you have it for our trios of the year. Again, honorable mention, Poder del Norte. Third place, Legado del Fantasma. NGD in second place. And first place, your winner, La Empresa. Dusty, our third category.
Yeah, third category. If you remember from last week, it was Tag Team of the Year. And the rundown was, we had Lucha Bros, we had Los Jinetes del Aire, we had Slice Boogie and Danny Limelight as the MLW LAX team, we had LFI with Dragon Lee and Kenny King, and Los Parks from MLW. And our first runner-up, or our honorable mention rather, our honorable mention was LFI with Dragon Lee and Kenny King. Third place was Los Jinetes del Aire. Second place was Slice Boogie and Danny Limelight. And first place this year was Pentagon and Phoenix, the Lucha Bros. I have to, I mean, like, I feel like we all knew that the Lucha Bros were going to be number one this year. They had such a big year. They did it all over. They had a big AAA year. They had a big AEW year. It was just really their year. And after such a notable absence last year, it felt like we needed them this year in a way. And it was, we mentioned it last week, it was emotionally rewarding to see them win the titles. That was something that we had wanted for a long time in AEW, and it felt like a recognition of them and a recognition of Lucha Libre as a whole to the American audience, and kind of a tacit approval and kind of, this is a cool thing from AEW towards Lucha Libre, and we got to see that play out, and it was because of the Lucha Bros, and for me, that gave them the edge. What did you think, Miranda?
Yeah, it's hard to argue against that. If you listen to last week's episode regarding our candidates for match of the year, they're there a few times because it really felt like everything came together for them this year, and they were really just outstanding as a tag team in both AEW and in AAA. And having that consistency between both of those promotions was great, and I just felt like they came into their own, and of course still providing amazing matches, and being in storylines that you could be invested in. The fact that they seem to be the antidote for what the Young Bucks brought and how annoying they were too. I think that just is icing on the cake there, but not surprised. I do have to say I was a bit surprised in the voting for Slice and Danny. I know that Danny in of himself was just, number one for our Rising Star of the Year, but as a tag team, between him and Slice was a lot more centralized to the West Coast up until just most recently when we saw them win the MLW tag team titles. But I do think that them being part of that larger collective of 5150 really is that platform that they need, or that really help with their visibility. And especially more established teams like LFI, Los Parks, Los Gigantes de Aire, to have them come up in second was a surprise to me.
I feel like we're to a couple of things on this. One is the consistency. Danny was the rising star, so he's already in our mind, but we all, without going into too much detail, we all agreed that that was a team that was worth voting on.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how that happened, is we all said, yes, this is a team is noteworthy this year. Whether it's based on, Danny or the titles or the fact that Conan is putting them over on, we can't undersell that. Conan is talking about them too.
Being their mouthpiece and kind of leader, like, that's a big deal. And for Conan to kind of, if you go back to our interview with Danny Rivera, he mentions that part of the reason he signed with MLW instead of AEW is they said, our plan is to reform LAX. We're going to put you with Conan, and you're going to be our singles guy of the faction. I mean, that is so cool. And the fact that he gets all of that makes him important, and it makes the tag team feel more important, because Danny is an important guy.
Yeah. And even, again, too, just having that visibility for Slice. We haven't talked a lot about him, but
he's amazing too.
Him and Slice both featured on New Japan. Slice is much more of the bigger guy. And so he's more of that powerhouse of the entire stable. And I think having that balance as a tag team, they work super well together. As I mentioned, the United Wrestling Network tag team champions. So if you see United Wrestling Network like Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, I know that expanded to Atlanta. I know that is expanding out, and they are working more as a tag team. PCW Ultra is also, pretty notable.
They're a faction over there, because they've added other West Coast Puerto Ricans to be a faction in PCW. So,
they're with Papo, and that's also the beautiful thing too, the fact that they are kind of interwoven between their own group, with Papo, with Ruby Rays, with 5150. They're a tag team. Danny's his own thing. Slice is his own guy too. So the fact that that's very interwoven and very seamless, that depending on where they are, they can be together, but they can compete independently. That's kind of the beauty of this as well, and why, and it's almost very similar to Los Gigantes de Aire, where individually they are strong, but together they are, fantastic.
Yeah.
And so there's very similar shades that I see of them with Los Gigantes de Aire.
I agree. And that's the one that surprised me, is that they actually came out just a little ahead in the voting of Los Jinetes. And it's, I was shocked, not for a second, but not that surprised, because like we talked about, they had the momentum, but you're right. They're both very similar teams, and they're both very similar factions, where we're kind of just waiting for them to explode. So just a little bit of momentum. I think Conan and some gold gives them at the end of the year, gives them momentum going into next year, as opposed to the Les Jinetes match was at the beginning of the year, and a lot of the excitement other than Vic about them was more towards the beginning of the year. So
well, and I feel like that kind of affects their going into the futures, because he's obviously going to be focusing on the singles thing right now and won't be working with
I don't know,
probably as much at least.
Yeah,
very true. Mega champion. Why would he?
Yeah, exactly. And so I mean, that affects things too. I mean, I feel like not that he was the sole excitement from that, but I feel like a lot of their popularity carried over from Vikingo, and just without his je ne sais quoi in the blend, it's not quite the same. And so I think that definitely gives Slice and Danny the edge there.
Very true. Well, there you have it for our tag team of the year. Again, honorable mention goes to LFI, Dragon Lee, and Kenny King. In third place, Los Jinetes de Aire. Second place, Slice Boogie and Danny Limelight. And first place, your winners of this category, the Lucha Bros. Well, we are very proud to be part of the Lucha Central Podcast Network, where you can find this show and others like our sister show, the Lucha Central Weekly Podcast Spanish edition on the network. But, at luchacentral.com. But you know what? There's so much more that you can find on luchacentral.com. Brendan, can you let our listeners know what else they can find?
Well, I can do that, and I absolutely can do that. There's another thing that we were talking about doing. Is this the time that I should do that, or should I just go read the thing and then we can do that other thing in a second?
Well, yeah, let's do this thing first and the other thing second.
Okay. Let's do this.
So many things to do, you guys.
So if you're listening to this, including all of our show planning in the middle of the show, and you haven't visited Lucha Central,
we'll do it live.
It's time to do it. LuchaCentral.com is your online home for Lucha Libre, where you can get all of the top news in English and in Spanish. Find the best curated video content and original content not seen anywhere else. Find when Lucha Libre events would be happening in your area. Find photo galleries from top photographers covering Lucha Libre around the world. A place to have your voices heard, from weekly polls to annual awards, seen and read by top executives in all of the major Lucha Libre promotions across the globe. And guess what, folks? It's still free. LuchaCentral.com, your centralized place for all things Lucha Libre.
Before we do that other thing, I do want to plug, as we talked about last time, Expo Lucha coming up. June 11th and 12th in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Right now, they have ticket bundles that are only $60. So 2 days of Expo, essentially that's only $30 plus per day. And again, you have live shows, you get art exhibits, you have panels, you have so much happening at Expo Lucha this year. As we teased in the last show, Expo Lucha could be a game changer in the way that we do these awards next year. We may get some amazing matches. We may get some top contenders for categories just by simply the events that are going to happen at Expo Lucha. So make sure to visit expolucha.com You can also follow Expo Lucha on social media, Expo Lucha Live on Instagram, and you can find information on tickets as well as match and talent announcements. Already announced for Expo Lucha, Laredo Kid versus Dragon Lee. Something that I certainly would imagine we're going to talk about.
Two guys who
next
have
year.
both been nominated in this very show, so
Yes.
yeah.
Also, we have a tag team match, Damian 666 and Black Taurus versus Psicosis, and a Luchador Sorpresa, surprise Luchador, that will be part of that. If you,
It's totally not Vikingo.
look at the picture, you guys. Just go to
And who they
Expo
tagged.
Yes,
They
Expo
also
Lucha
tagged
Live.
somebody in the photo.
Expo Lucha Live on Instagram. You'll see what we mean. Super Crazy versus Ultimo Dragon also announced. And then a lot of talent announcements, including Gringo Loco, the current NWA World Tag Team Champions, Bestia 666 and Mecha Wolf, Super Crazy, Super Astro Jr., Mr. Iguana, Pirata Morgan, Juventud Guerrera, Aries, Lady Maravilla, Ario Boy, Solar, Tinables Jr., so much more that will be announced over the next few months for Expo Lucha. You just gotta make your way to it. It's early enough in the year where you can start making plans for June. Again, June 11th, June 12th, the 2300 Arena, Philly, baby.
Really. I just want to, since we talked a little bit about things that happened last time, you mentioned the art exhibits. One cool thing that we got one of the years, and we may get something like this again, is they had the designer of Rey Mysterio's outfits he basically put like a past, present, and even gave us a little tease of some of his future outfits. All on display. You could go up, you could touch them, you could look at the fine detail on it, you could talk to him about the design process that he had in mind when he was doing it. It was a fantastic display, well worth your time. So that's the quality of kind of art events that you're gonna get. It's not just like me in the corner making stickers, which I'll probably be doing.
Yeah. So excited for Expo Lucha. I cannot wait. I know, Christmas is one thing, but Expo Lucha is its own thing you wait all year for.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So, Brendan, in the spirit of having fun and something that we talked about last episode, we did have a new category introduced for this year's awards, one that you had a very big hand in introducing. So please, would love to add it in this part of the show, our new category for this year and the winner of the category.
Yeah, so we decided to not have a whole bunch of nominees because it's really about one kind of classic moment that we all agreed on in this. This is the Cookie Sheet of the Year, the Cookie Sheet Award, not Cookie Sheet of the Year, that would be silly. But that is the point of this. It's a ridiculous, silly, fun moment that happened throughout the year. And we had two really strong ones, so I'm just gonna go ahead and mention them both because, they're both they're both super appropriate and they're both kind of related to each other. In that they're both WWE not knowing what to do with luchadors.
Sorpresa!
So one is Drew Gulak, losing a match and getting a rose in his backside from, the Lothario, what is his WWE name?
Angel Garza.
It's Angel
he's just
Garza.
Angel now.
Yeah.
Just Angel, yes.
Yeah. He's always Garza Jr. to me.
You're right. I started to say Garza Jr. and I was like, oh wait, no, it's WWE.
Yeah.
And then, the other one was John Morrison being eaten by zombies. And both of these.
For a second, you were like, "Wait, did they do this in Lucha Underground? Is this a Lucha Underground story that they just didn't?" Actually, I think it would have been cool to be in Lucha Underground story.
It would have been a lot less cringy if it was a Lucha Underground story.
They ate the Miz too, so Johnny Drip Drip, America's most moist wanted, only served to whet their appetite.
Oh my God. You've been sitting on that one, haven't you?
I have. I thought of it when we were talking about this earlier, and I was like, I'm going to pull that out.
So good. Oh, so there it is. And this moment of us just generally laughing is what this award is all about. It's just a ridiculous and fun moment that'll happen in Lucha Libre. If you out there are listening and you think you see one during the course of the year, just fire it away at us, because, you know, we love these things. Even if we don't mention it on the show, we're going to watch it and we're going to giggle, I guarantee.
Yeah. I love the fun ones.
Yes. And, well, we'll just see what happens when we do this category next year.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably a WWE moment again, but no.
Well, let us know, too, your guys' thoughts on the Cookie Shoot Award. Is there something that we missed? Is there an event that you think we should have nominated or discuss more? You know, hey, just let us know on social media your thoughts on the Cookie Sheet Award. And yeah, shoving a rose up some guy's ass is just...
It's a weird moment.
It's weird, you guys.
It's
weird. You thought
Only
that...
wrestling.
Only wrestling.
Like, Steve Austin hitting people with a bedpan has nothing on a roast in the ass, just sands.
All right, back to our categories. I can't transition. I transition pretty well. I pride myself in being a transitioner that like can transition from things smoothly. I couldn't. I just couldn't.
It's just too ridiculous.
Too much. All right, so we are now in the second half of our nominees, and we have Luchadora of the Year. In this category, nominated was Raquel Gonzalez from NXT, Miranda Alizé from Ring of Honor and across the Independents, Thunder Rosa, AEW, Mission Pro Wrestling, and La Mera Mera, really all of the Independents, Baronesa, and Ring of Honor World Women's World Champion Roxy. So our honorable mention for this category was Baronesa. Third place, we had Roxy. Second place, Raquel Gonzalez. And first place, Thunder Rosa. And I think as we've talked about these categories, you know, not super surprising with how the voting played out on this, but I want to get your guys' thoughts before jumping in. Dusty, Brendan, is this what you thought we were going to get for Luchadora of the Year?
Honestly, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I pretty much expected Thunder Rosa. I mean, she's to the point that was made last week was she's not really Luchadora of the Year. She's kind of Wrestler of the Year. She's the most visible face in wrestling right now. I mean, she's just all over the place. Yeah, it was not that big of a surprise to me. I am, despite the fact that we talked more about Baronessa in the last week's episode than any of the other women, but, which I think is how she got into that honorable mention. I think somebody talked themselves into, some voting there.
And that's and again, that's very fair as well. Again, someone who's making, you know, really initiating her U.S. presence, and someone who in the ring is really talented. I saw it firsthand myself, and just her look as well. Someone that I think too, really outside of Miranda Alizé, the only masked luchadora on this list.
True.
And that too, I think, lends itself to, to something that's very unique. I know too, I guess we kind of talked, not necessarily talked a lot about this, but, you know, as far as people that we didn't see on this list is, you know, a lot of the luchadoras from AAA. And I think that was just something that, you know, based off of having more trios matches and not having a lot of singles matches on here was something that, you know.
Yeah. Also notably missing the CMLL women who just a lot of the time they weren't doing matches in the early part of this year, and then they finally started doing some tournaments, but nobody really stands out except for sometimes Dallas stands out in that it's obvious she doesn't really want to lose even when she has to. So it's hard to put a nominee out there like that. They all had solid years, but they all had very steady years.
Yeah, another name too that this is more of a recent development and tied to Roxy is Deonna Purrazzo. She is the AAA Reina de Reinas champion, but has not defended the title yet. So that too is something that, even though she is ranked one of the, in one of the world's best, wrestlers, period, but also just her presence, in women's wrestling was someone that, until I think we see more of her in, AAA, was kind of left out of this category. But Thunder Rosa, I completely agree with that. She still continued. I think for Thunder Rosa is, how does she beat what she was able to do last year? And I think it was continuing that plus more. And I think that is really why she stood out as number one this year. A close second, was Raquel Gonzalez, who really reached the pinnacle of her career, both by winning the inaugural Dusty Tag Team Cup on the women's side, becoming NXT women's tag team titles champions for even just a night, and then ultimately her rise to become NXT women's champion. I think all of that within the NXT system is so notable for her. And of course Roxy, as we talked about last show, I mean, becoming the youngest ROH women's champion at 19, having a whole career ahead of her and already reaching such a high achievement, being a constant presence throughout the independent scene, defending that belt across independent promotions. And that may be the one thing that helps keep the name of Ring of Honor afloat really over, the next few months, as we will see her continuing her work throughout the independent scene, and a possibly looming woman takes all match between her and Deonna Purrazzo, will they, won't they type of thing.
Yeah, she's just going to be, we're going to talk about her a lot regardless. We can't, as Taya proved, we can't always guarantee what's going to happen, but I mean, even by Taya not being on the list for nominees this year, we still end up talking about her. So I feel like Roxy's going to have that same energy for a few years.
I agree. I think that, especially because she's so young, that she's going to be almost ever present in a way. And I hope that it doesn't lead to people kind of taking it for granted that she's around because she started so young and she's so good. I hope that carries over, that velocity she's got right now kind of carries her on.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. And there you have it for Luchadora of the Year, with honorable mention going to Baronessa, third place Roxy, second place Raquel Gonzalez, and first place, your winner, Thunder Rosa. Brendan, take it away with our next category.
Well, this is much like the last category, only this is for Luchador of the Year. We had 5 nominees, so let's just go over those real quick. We had Io del Vikingo, Aries, LA Park, Laredo Kid, and Rush. This one, I'm going to go over we had, the results on this one were super interesting, the way that they actually spelled out. But so we have 2 honorable mentions, with Aries and LA Park both receiving a nod that they deserve to be mentioned. And then we had Rush at third place, Laredo Kid in second, and to no one's surprise, I'm listening to this, Hijo del Vikingo came in first. And really, I feel like, so first off, without going into too much detail, we have a way of tabulating the votes, and everyone that voted on this agreed that Hijo del Vikingo was Luchador of the Year. There was no questioning he was the top voter by any means.
Absolutely. It was unanimous that he was Luchador of the Year.
Yeah. So that the voting kind of really became about who else was going to get some recognition out of this. And as it turns out, we were all quite divided. It shows just how even the rest of the field was, if it weren't for the fact that you had this one crazy guy we'd been waiting for, and had a match that was potentially going to be match of the year pulled out from under the rug on him, and still had an amazing match to win that title. So, you guys go ahead, fill in your thoughts here.
I think that the title match, if he had gotten that Kenny Omega match, that Vikingo, it would have sealed the deal on him. I think he would have been instant legend. But he's still a very young guy. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing that we didn't get that match. As we see, he's still Luchador of the Year. He's still the person I think has the most promise of any wrestler, any country in the world next year to blow up and be the guy, to go from like obscurity to the guy. Not that he's obscure, but he's not as well known in America. Right. I think that next year he will be. I think he's going to be a very big deal. And as much as we picked him of Luchador of the Year this year, I feel like it also sets him up for Luchador of the Year next year in a big way, because he's one of very few people that can deliver on the promise. And his promise isn't even as big as his delivery. And so that is so exciting with the Hijo del Vikingo. And I just don't think anybody can touch him this year. I'm not sure anybody nation or internationally anywhere can touch him.
I mean, he's kind of the big story in most of the, for sure.
I mean, I think the second place is really the only person who really can in that international reach, and that's currently Laredo Kid. Because I think Laredo Kid was in that spot last year when he actually got that rub from Kenny Omega in that championship match. And Laredo Kid is, as I had mentioned too, still having that, U.S. presence, still being mixed. Last year as well, he was, briefly with MLW. This year, he's been making appearances in Impact. Still someone who's very active in the independent scene as well. So I feel like, Laredo Kid has been in those shoes as Hijo de Vikingo. But I think Hijo's growth and popularity has just reached new heights in a shorter amount of time. And again, Hijo's has gotten this as internationally just by word of mouth without stepping foot in the U.S. Whereas everybody else on this list has had some, U.S. presence this year. So I think that too speaks, layers, to where everyone is in their career. I think, with Rush, there could have been more if there was just the challenges with injury, with Ring of Honor. But again, I think it is that recognition of being the world champion, in Ring of Honor, being that person in Ring of Honor as a luchador, is still such a big, a big deal. And I think the family dynamic too is very hard to not be able to acknowledge. So I think for Rush is more of what could have been. And again, it's not necessarily sad, but I think it's just more that, it could have been a different story for Rush, in this category, but I don't know if he would have been able to beat Hijo.
Well, that's just it. So if you eliminate Hijo from the whole thing, say that just didn't happen, Rush and Laredo Kid would probably have been the two biggest names that we were talking about for Luchador of the Year, because they were on pace from 2020. But, that's why they have to play the games in sports, because it's predicted, you can predict pretty accurately, doesn't mean that you can get it right all the time. And But the other side of that, we knew Io was big, and we knew he was going to be big at some point. It was a question of when, not if. So
Yes.
here we go.
100%. Well, listeners, that is our Luchador of the Year category. Again, honorable mentions went both to Addis and LA Park. In third place, we had Roosh. Second place, Laredo Kid. And first place, with a perfect score, or as those of us who play Mortal Kombat know, fatality. That would be maybe not a perfect score in fatality. That's just like the landing blow. Forget flawless victory is a perfect
flawless. There it
flawless
is.
Victory. Yes, it's Hijo de Vikingo, your current AAA Mega Campeón. And last but not least, we have our final category. Dusty, please introduce it.
Yeah, our final category, Match of the Year. And we mentioned it last week. All the matches involved kind of raised the bar a little, but I feel like our choices especially showed which ones raised the bar. I'll run them down. The choices for this year, the contenders were Lucha Bros versus Los Jinetes del Aire from AAA Heroes Inmortales, Roxy versus Miranda Morales from Death Before Dishonor, Ring of Honor, Balor versus Karrion Kross 2 from WWE's NXT Weekly Show, Young Bucks versus Lucha Bros from AEW All Out 2021, and Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa Lights Out match, AEW St. Patrick's Day Slam. And our third place, we actually had a tie for third place between Roxy and Miranda Morales from Death Before Dishonor, and the Lucha Bros versus Los Jinetes del Aire from Heroes Inmortales, tied for third. Second place was Young Bucks versus Lucha Bros from All Out, and our first place was Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa in the Lights Out match from AEW St. Patrick's Day Slam. I feel like that after the conversation we had last week, it was kind of obvious that the number one match had to be Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa. In terms of impact worldwide, in terms of changing the game, in terms of cementing somebody as a top caliber talent, this match did so much for both Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa. They were names, and they were obviously like highlights in women's wrestling, but this match made them both certified stars, like especially Britt Baker. Thunder Rosa was already kind of made. She was NWA Women's Champion. She was legitimate, but this match legitimized Britt Baker, and it really made them both stars. It changed the game for what women on TV especially can do in America. It was just so unique and so different and had so much emotion. And this was the match, we touched on it, where Thunder Rosa said, I don't want to be Women's Wrestler of the Year. I want to be Wrestler of the Year. And this match did that. She won the feud, won the match. It did so much for her, even though it was an unsanctioned match and she didn't become, world champion. I don't know that anybody needed her to become world champion. It did more for her to win this feud than I think the championship would have at that time, just because the eyes that were on it. At one time, I don't know if it's still the case, this was the most watched TV match in AEW history. And you can see why when you go back and watch it. It is intense. They pull everything out that they've got. But as much as we mentioned this with a few other matches, this was the rare intersection where we had story in the ring versus story in the build. Like, it was just everything fired on all cylinders, and these two women were what made it work. It was obviously Match of the Year, Luchador of the Year, honestly Thunder Rosa Wrestler of the Year. Like, it just... But it all ties to this match. Like, this was really her pinnacle for the year, and it's crazy how quickly she did that. Just fantastic. Young Bucks versus Lucha Bros, as we mentioned, from AEW All Out. They got two highlights this year. Big year for AEW with the Lucha. And just the fact that they're willing to highlight luchadors and luchadoras and highlight that lucha style, whereas it feels like WWE tries to squelch it and hide it under a blanket. It's just so much going on. So excited. What do you think, Brendan? What are your opinions on some of these matches?
Well, I mean, I agree. We all kind of got the sense coming out of that conversation that Baker Thunder Rosa was probably going to win. I am a little, well, I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed that the Young Bucks got second place on. Like, I just, it was a fine match.
That's the dad reaction to it.
Yeah.
I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed.
I'm just disappointed. Yeah, like, you know, I thought I made my case clear that the Jinetes del Aire match.
Nah, that means just flippy shit will always win.
There's lots of flippy shit.
Dumb
that
flippy
match.
shit. That's kind of
there was
dumb
lots of
flippy
flippy shit in the other match that I
Viva flippy shit.
That's why the internet is always so angry. I get that now. I do get that now.
No, there was yeah, but that's where I was at. But I also like that we got the tie, and that the technical masterpiece of the Roxy Miranda Alizé match was considered enough to get into third place. I was looking at the matches it was up against and not thinking it had a chance in hell, really. Just so.
I would say that also I'm a little proud of myself. Okay, so as you all know, I am not the technical match expert of this trio. I'm very much more storyline driven, and I'm much more, I just like dumb things. Not to say what I'm about to say is dumb, but I nominated, the Britt Baker, Thunder Rosa match, is in this category. It was my only nomination. I really I trust Brendan and Dusty's opinions, regarding matches, and, I didn't know what I could contribute to this. But when I was going through and seeing things, this kind of popped out, and let's peel the curtain back, more of a last minute addition. We had some of these other matches listed prior to this one. So I think it does, the recency bias does come into play when it comes to, things like this, where the more recent matches are the ones that you tend to think about first. This one being all the way back in the spring was one where we had to do a double take. But also I do think that something that we note about, with Thunder Rosa and different styles of Lucha Libre, which we see in the first and second, is the very different styles of Lucha Libre, in this, where we do talk about see the brawler, more brutal, more violent type of Lucha Libre, which we, especially for women, don't see very often, if ever. But it does exist. And we did see that on American television. And I think Thunder Rosa was the perfect person to do that with. Compared to the flippy shit of the Lucha Bros and the Young Bucks. And that's just, two sides of the coin. Not to say that those are the only sides of Lucha Libre. There's very much everything in between, as we even see in third place. So I think we covered a spectrum of different styles of Lucha Libre, but I think what came out were kind of the notables of this one, with Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker, this, really being the leading to the end of a contested feud, really helping establish both women in very different ways, and it showcasing again a more violent style of wrestling that was done very well. It was not violence for the sake of violence. And Thunder Rosa is the woman to do this. She is a huge element of Texas wrestling. Between that and her work all over the world, but especially in Mexico, she was the right person to pull this match off. As much as it did for Britt Baker, Britt, I don't think would have known or would have had this pulled off as well if she didn't have the right partner in Thunder Rosa.
It wouldn't have been half as good.
It's
all anybody else, it wouldn't have been half as good.
Yes, it would have been a lot messier, not in the blood and guts type of way, but just in the execution. On the other hand, you have the Lucha Bros and Young Bucks, flippy. Everyone has their opinions about it. It's totally fair and justified. Again, as we looked at the other end of the spectrum with Lucha Bros and Jinetes de Aire, which was much more of a well executed match. again, I think storyline went out, and the big gold belts, like I think
Yes.
the championship aspect of it really played out into the story. They were the ones to beat the Young Bucks out of this annoying reign, and I love that.
And they were
aspect.
annoying heels, like the
Yes.
Lucha Bros were the faces in that, and the Technicos, like it was just like it felt so good to have the Young Bucks beaten, and that's part of the flippy shit in the match was that the Bucks were healing it up, and part of that is the flips and the Bucks style.
Yeah, and it's again, this is not the first time we've seen them in this match. This is not the first time they've told this story, but the way they told it this time, I think added some more to it. But also for the third place, again, it's almost kind of the opposites of our first two, where you had two more technically sound matches, in different, types and for different, competitions that I think both were really well noted, and I'm glad that they were recognized. It was a very hard category this year, and it was because they were all over the spectrum. I think it was those little nuances, at least for us individually, that stuck to us that made the difference in second, third place, and even first place, because there was really a very narrow margin between first and second. Very narrow, so it could easily have been flipped. But I think the nuances and what was important to us in the lights out match won over than, the all out match, from the Lucha Bros and Young Bucks.
Yeah, I agree.
Super exciting category. Like,
Yeah.
I expect that's going to be true every year, that it's going to be hotly contested and passionately argued, every year. But, this year you could see it. I mean, I'm looking at the results and I can see how the voting actually went down. And it was the narrowest of margins all the way across. Like there's not even that much difference between first and third place in the voting. So
yes. There you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, match of the year again. Third place was a tie between the Lucha Bros and Los Gigantes de Aire from AAA Heroes Inmortales in October, as well as Roxy versus Miranda Alizé for the ROH Women's World Championship at Death Before Dishonor. Second place, Young Bucks versus Lucha Bros for the AEW World Tag Team titles at All Out 2021. And your winner, first place, Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa, the lights out match from AEW St. Patrick's Day Slam on the March 17th edition of Dynamite. Our winners, our number one match of the year, as voted by us here on the Lucha Central Weekly podcast team. Again, let us know your thoughts on all of our winners, our nominees, on social media. I'm going to do one more time. Ask the guys for your social media. So, Dusty, where can our listeners find you?
I am on Instagram at Dusty Murphy, and I am on Facebook at facebook.com/Dusty Murphy.
And Brendan, where can our listeners find you?
I am 321 T-shirt guy. That's the numbers 321, and T-shirt guy is all spelled out. I am on Facebook, I am on Instagram, and I'm all over the Twitters.
And me, Miranda Morales. You can find me at the #Miranda, spelled out on Instagram and Facebook. Also, don't forget to check out luchacentral.com, your centralized place for all things Lucha Libre. You can follow Lucha Central on social media at Lucha Central on Facebook. I believe in Facebook and Instagram, and at luchacentral.com on Twitter.
Correct.
Yes, and make sure to follow Lucha Central, of course, for all of your weekly news and results from the world of pro wrestling. Of course, make sure to follow Lucha Central for news regarding the upcoming Expo Lucha event happening in June. We're going to be talking about it as we get through 2022. And thank you all once again for another year with us here on the Lucha Central Weekly podcast. I'm going to let each of the guys give their own little thank yous and thoughts of the year. So, Dusty, feel free to let our listeners know your thoughts, appreciations, anything regarding this year in the Lucha Central Weekly podcast.
I really had a great time doing the podcast with you guys again this year. Enjoyed it last year. It's one of the highlights of my week every week to do the podcast. I love hearing from the fans when they have something to say about the show, or when I post some of my masks on Instagram, on the stories. I hear from fans once in a while. I hope we get more of that fan engagement in 2022. You guys are really the reason why we do this. We don't do it for ourselves so much. And so I would love to have more of that. Tag us and things, the cookie sheet matches you think are match of the year, people you think are luchador of the year. Let us know. Maybe we'll try to find some way to incorporate that with the fans next year. So keep us posted.
And Brendan, thoughts on 2021? Anything about the show? Anything you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I'm going to echo Dusty and thank the fans for being fantastic, and hopefully we continue to have more interaction. I hope to see a whole lot of people that listen to the show at Expo Lucha and other events, but for sure we're all going to be at Expo Lucha, so that's the one I'm going to push. I also want to thank both of you guys for making this a fun thing to do every week. It's even the weeks like this where we're doing 2 or 3, it's still a highlight of the week every time. And then I'm going to take the time here. I'm going to thank all of the zebras, the referees out there, for doing this job, because, even though you're the ones that get made fun of when you get super kicked and are knocked out for 5 years, and you obviously blind as a bat and missing all of the international objects that come into the ring, you're always there to be part of the show, to make everybody look better, make everybody feel better, and keep everybody safe. So thank you to you guys too.
I would also like to thank all of the listeners, everyone who's listened, whether this is your first episode or been with us over this year. We cannot thank you enough for taking the time to listen to our show, for the feedback that you've provided to us, for just being a part of our week to week. Brendan and Dusty are great co-hosts and a great team. I feel really fortunate to be able to have learned continuously from both of you guys and be on a team like this. I am so appreciative and grateful for you guys as co-hosts, because I would literally be lost without you. Also, a big thank you to luchacentral.com, our home, the place that we've been able to have this podcast on, the place that we've been able to represent this year. It is truly an honor to be part of that podcast network, and also the website. And also to the boss people, Kevin Kleinrock and Ruben Zamora from Mass Republic, who help and are kind of co-partners with luchacentral.com, and people who we shout out all the time, but this would not be possible without both of you. We are excited for everything that's to come for Lucha Central and Mass Republic in 2022, and we just are so appreciative to have the opportunity to help represent those brands, and doing that through the podcast and also through various types of events and coverage of so many things. And also our partners at thechairshot.com. A special shout out to our producer, Greg DeMarco, who constantly is, someone who is doing a lot of behind the scenes work, and also this year distributed our show through thechairshot.com to get us to a new audience. Thank you, Greg, for the work that you do, putting us up every week. Thank you for adding us to the Chairshot Radio Network and giving us a second home, and constantly reminding me to send you files. So that's just a way to thank all of the people who make this show possible on a weekly basis. We are going to be back in 2022. We're going to keep on rolling with this. More interviews to come. Please make sure to check out our interviews from this year. We've definitely had a lot of great interviews. and that have been, wonderful to conduct. And we hope that you guys all listen to special content out there that, well, really you can't find anywhere else. Make sure to listen to the Lucha Central Podcast Network on luchacentral.com. And, of course, all your favorite podcast streaming platforms, Spotify, Podbase, Speaker, iTunes, and much, much more. Just find luchacentral.com or Lucha Central Podcast Network wherever you are. And with that, we've ended our end of year awards. We've ended 2022 or 2021. I just jumped to the future there.
Don't end 2022 yet. I need to see it.
Looking forward to 2022 with these two guys here, as well as all of you. So for Brendan Barr and Dusty Murphy, I'm Miranda Morales. Thank you all so much, and we'll be with you next week.
En esta esquina, el santo y el tabernario.